Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening to you. Whoa, wait a minute. We're over here. I forgot to move the camera. Hello, this is WeatherBrains episode number 814. This is the pre-show, the magical, marvelous time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things, and we fix the camera. Let's put this thing up here where it's supposed to be. All right, we are now live. We are live on the air. I think we're good to go here. Got a busy show tonight. Goodness, we got a lot of stuff going on here. So we're going to try and get everybody on time. So let's get right to it. We're going to get the embed code going so we can get this on television. For those that don't know, this show is aired locally on our digital weather channel in this market on over the air and on cable. A lot of folks like to watch it that way. Sit back and watch the old-fashioned way on the smell-o-vision. But we know that most of you are watching on the digital side. So let's invite everybody. And again, it's going to be a packed show this evening, a good show. But if you're here for the content, move the slider over about 6 minutes and you will find it. But we always open up with some interesting pre-show material here. Okay, and let's invite everybody, and they are now invited, and we're good to go. All right, this is for August 23rd, 2021. Middle of the hurricane season. But guess what? We are like that close to getting to the beginning of meteorological fall, the 1st of September. Do you remember the 23rd night of September? No, I can't wait. Fall is got to be, it's got to be my favorite season. I struggle between fall and winter. And not that there's anything wrong with spring and summer. Listen, when you're my age, you're glad to be around during any season, okay? But typically when those first good cool breezes of the fall season begin to kick in, that's when it gets good and the weather gets more interesting, because for 3.3 months, we say every day, hot, humid with the chance of an afternoon thunderstorm in scattered spots. How many different ways can you say that?
37.
Yeah, 37. Scattered afternoon storms. A few spots could see a passing storm today. Got a handful of scattered storms popping up tomorrow afternoon. You just kind of learn to say it over and over and over and over and over and over and over.
I think you had another couple of good ones there, James. I should have been taking notes. I guess I'll have to go back and watch the recording.
Yeah, there you go. You always get good. Now, Bill is at some Roach Motel here. I'm trying to figure out where he is. I've never seen him with this angle before. This is.
You have. You actually have. I was here the day the tornado hit your house.
Oh, great. Goodness.
I was here a month ago when we did this. So does that help you? Does that help you at all, Mr. Span?
DC?
Yeah, how'd you do that? That's pretty smart.
We got ants around here.
Ants?
We got an ant problem here. It's like. Really,
is it like the Geico commercial where they just have a bunch of old ladies that are living in the house with them? Or really?
Yeah.
I'm Jen.
Yeah, that's basically it. But
hey, Jeremy, have you approved my Facebook friend request yet?
Who, me?
No. I'm just kidding. Right? That Geico commercial where all the ants move in with a little couple and meet them in the hallway. Have you approved my Facebook?
I've always heard.
What
you need to do is get a lighter and you torch an ant. And they will go back the other way, and the ants will communicate that, hey, that guy was torched. Let's get out of here. I've always heard that if you torch an ant.
What you mean, like he's got 3rd-degree burns over his entire body? He goes back.
Yeah, I mean, you just burn one to a crisp, and then somehow the ants that saw that will go back and tell the other ants, hey, I mean, this guy got torched down here. We got to get out of here, and they will vacate the premise. I think I should try
them. Does that have the same effect?
Well, no, you have to burn them. I mean, it's like some kind of torturous death for an ant. And
y'all see my hand is getting better. Look at that, James. You want to throw up? I tried to torch myself 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
With an espresso machine.
Well, anyway,
we got a lot of folks here. This is going to be a big show tonight.
Yeah,
We
I've
do.
reached out to Tom, so hopefully he comes on here.
I
I'll double
see
check.
2 of the tornado trackers and David Drummond. Good. Okay. We're going in the right direction. Hello, Gabe.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hey, Jeremy.
Good to see y'all.
Just got off
So
the
David,
other Zoom
our
with
young
David.
David, our youngest son just moved to Nashville, so I told him
Uh-oh.
to follow you on the tweeter. And
Excellent.
we'll take care of him.
Yeah. That's if you want to be taken care of with weather in Nashville. You changed hats, Mr. Drummond.
Yeah, my buddy, I went to a Springfield Cardinals game when I was in Missouri with my buddy from college, and I realized I'm going to get some grief if I don't put on my Nashville Soccer Club hat. So I ran out of my car and pulled it out.
There's Jeff. That's not Claire, James. That's Jeff.
Yeah, I did change that. My daughter, that's 2020 homeschooling with COVID right there.
It's like a boy named Sue.
Okay, Claire.
Feel free to call me Claire.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, there's no walking that.
Sorry about that, Jeff. I should keep my mouth.
That's my new chase name.
You can never play that Johnny Cash song. We ought to do a
boy named Sue.
yeah, you can't play that. I mean, there are so many songs that would never ever be played ever. They're banned. You can't play those songs anymore.
What's wrong with the boy named Sue?
Well, it's like you can't bump no more with no big fat woman. Who did that song? See, nobody even wants to talk
Wow,
about
I came in at a bad time.
Yes, you did, Troy Ryan.
Holy
it.
crap.
I feel like I need to Google it.
No. Who did that song?
I don't remember
And now it's going
that
to
song.
drive me crazy.
I thought you knew every song that ever been produced that might have been on your radio. Was that ever on your radio?
Joe Tex. Joe Tex did that
No,
song.
Joe Tech, you're right.
See, we can't play any music here because we'll get kicked off of
Yeah,
YouTube.
and the show won't be.
Anyway, all right, let's get this thing going.
Thank
here,
you,
'cause
thank you.
we have
We
a
need to-
very
He's having a
We
hard
need
time
some
getting
more.
Bill. He's having a hard time getting in. He said he clicked and hit launch meeting and nothing happens. I got a Zoom is updating message. So I've sent him the
Zoom is
link on-
updating.
Yeah, I sent him on email and also text.
Okay, well, let's get this
So-
thing started, and we'll make it happen.
Okay,
here.
we're winging
All
it.
We're gonna wing this. Here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
That's what Bill Curtis says. We're kind of a big deal. I mean, how many weather shows? How many weather shows? Podcasts get an opening liner from Bill Curtis. I mean, Jen, thanks for doing that. That's awesome. Hey, this is WeatherBrains episode number
You bet.
814. This is for the 23rd of August, 2021, the midst of the Atlantic hurricane season. Thankfully, things pretty quiet right now. So we got a busy show tonight. Goodness gracious, looking at all the folks on here. Jen, how are you doing? How's life?
I'm doing good. Hottest week of the summer is about to be upon me. So I'm spending a lot of times in one room in the living room, which I have the air conditioner there. Outside of that, it's very hot everywhere else. Pretty hot in the studio. So if you see me sweating doing this, I'm
Ladies, don't
glistening.
sweat.
No, we
Ladies,
glisten.
don't sweat.
glisten.
Yes, you glow. You glow.
That's right. So if you see me glowing, you'll know why. No, it's all
Yes,
good.
tr-
I'm blessed. It's very awesome here.
No,
In
Troy
Washington,
down in
the
Austin.
ladies are sweating.
Troy sweats. Troy, you sweat, baby, in Austin. Travis,
No, our
honey, come on.
viewpoint's actually down a little bit today. It was nicer in the house, which is good. Managing to stay cool in here, but it actually dew point was down a little bit. So it was only heat index, I think 105 today. That's quite pleasant.
Not bad for an August day in
Yeah,
Austin,
exactly.
Tejas.
Yeah.
Kim, how's your dew point in Norman, Oklahoma this evening?
It had been at times over the previous week higher than it is now. So yeah, I just checked the Mesnet. We're in the 60s, which
Yeah.
it still isn't. 67 isn't my idea of comfort, but it's better than it could be. So I'm with you, Troy. Our heat index at 88 degrees with a 67 dew point, might be close to the upper 90s,
go.
or that's comfortable.
Yep.
So I checked our dew point. Birmingham's at 71, but Demopolis, Alabama, which is on the western side of the state, they're coming in at 79. So that's that good old juicy air. But got a busy show tonight, Bill Murray. So let's just go right to you and let's get this thing going.
Yeah, James, we really do got a really powerful show tonight.
but I was going to say that all the women in Washington, James, they're sweating because it is hot here in Washington, D.C. Currently 90 at Washington National.
And that is a show title. The women in Washington are sweating.
Sweating.
There's no question. I walked down to Shake Shack to get my dinner after I checked in the hotel, and I can vouch that everyone is sweating here in Washington.
Oh,
DC.
so the men and women are both sweating then.
Oh yeah, everybody's sweating.
Oh, okay.
It is an
But
equal opportunity to
that's not a
sweat
good
here.
show title. The show title is "Sweating Women in Washington" so far.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny because
That will
I was
get us some
talking to-
viewers, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably true. I had to explain to the guest that's coming on October 18th today. Really outstanding, gentleman who's, when I communicated with him, I asked him to be on the show. And he said, well, I need to go check it out. I'm like, yeah, we're pretty proud of it. Go check it out. Here it is. He came back and he said, I just watched last week's show. And he said, it moved me to tears. He said, you guys, that was an amazing show. He said, are all of them like that? I said, well, they're not usually that intense, but they're all good. We've had a lot of great guests on here. And so he's convinced that it's a good show. So we'll let one person think that out there. But he thought it was good enough to come on the show. And he usually gets $5,000 to speak, James Spann. We're going to get him for free.
Wow.
So how about that?
Okay.
But we'll talk about that in a minute. But tonight's guest panelist is no stranger to any of us and anybody that watches or listens to the show or anyone that follows weather on Twitter. He's the founder of Nash Severe WX, the definitive source for Music City weather information. And that's me talking, not his bio. James already said tonight that he recommended his son follow David, but it's with a heavy heart tonight that we welcome to the show in the wake of the staggering floods that hit Middle Tennessee Saturday morning. David Drobny, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Appreciate it. It's 84/69 right here in Nashville right now.
There you go. David, this is a heartbreaking event. We want to go into it in depth with you tonight during the weather roundup. But just, talk for a second for our listeners before we go on and talk to the Tom Moore and the tornado trackers here for a second, and just kind of fill us in if anybody wasn't listening or watching. And I don't know how you could have missed it because it's a national news story.
Yeah, Waverly's a town, an hour, 13-minute drive from downtown Nashville. It's west of Nashville. 4,300 people live there. They live in a valley. And early on Saturday morning, a state record for 24-hour rainfall occurred. And we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it later. But a flash flood occurred, unlike anything that they'd seen before, or really that anybody that I've talked to, and I've talked to several people about it, had seen before here in Middle Tennessee. It was some of the phrases that were used where it was like a dam broke. One guy called it a mini tsunami. I've been told the mayor actually, Waverly, said it was like it came with the quickness of a tornado. The accounts are all consistent, and we had substantial loss of life. So far, there's 22 killed, and there are 12 missing right now. And of course, this is the moment my dog starts to bark in the back. Sorry about that.
Just know that once they bark, you have to introduce them later, David. So that's Nate Johnson.
Well, that's right. If I could catch them, I would. But yeah, it was a horrible thing, and some of the stories are. I mean, I can tagline some of them later, but from the survivors, and there are social media stories from some of the victims who posted. I mean, we're in the age now where some of these people who do not survive floods are doing Facebook Lives and other social media, posting them, and then we're finding out later that they did not survive. And the last thing that they left with the world was a social media post. So this is an exceptional event that occurred on a sleepy Saturday morning. And I don't know what else to say. I mean, you really don't know what to say. I think the best thing you can do is be responsible with telling other people what happened and telling their stories. I know that some of the people some of the family members of those who lost their lives said, we want people to understand what happened here. And I'm certainly not the best. I'm not a journalist, and I'm certainly not talented in doing that. But I'll give my effort this evening during the show to tell some of their stories and to describe some of the unique things that came together to cause this to happen on this type of scale.
We're sorry you're here under these circumstances, but it's always good to talk to you. We're going to deputize you now as a guest panelist. So maybe you step in, join just like us through the whole call, but we're glad you're here tonight. So tonight's guest WeatherBrains, though, are the suggestion of friend of the podcast, Richard Cook. They're the co-founders of Tornado Trackers. The background of our first guest WeatherBrain is filmmaking. That made it possible to make a career out of capturing high-end storm footage for use in movies, documentaries, disaster relief. Lives in Georgetown, Texas, down there near you, Troy.
Yep.
With his wife and 2 daughters who support and encourage him in the pursuit of documenting storms. Gabe Cox, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
We thought you might be chasing Hurricane Henri this weekend, but I guess you
was
decided
waiting
to stay home.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if it was actually going to make landfall as a hurricane, and I wasn't feeling it. Glad I stayed home, spent the weekend with my kids.
Well, we're so thrilled you're here tonight too. So thanks for being part. It's going to be a fun show. Tonight's guest, second guest, WeatherBrain, grew up in the Austin, Texas suburb of Georgetown, same as Gabe, where he is now. Jeff spent 23 years as a pastor, and just last year made the transition to pursue broadcast meteorology at the young age of 45. He's enrolled in Mississippi State's Certificate of Broadcast Meteorology program. Married his wife Christy for 21 years. Had 3 children: Paige, Tyler, and Claire. Jeff Mangum, welcome to WeatherBrain.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here with y'all.
Yeah, it really is. By the time the introductions are done, we're going to be ready to go to the weather roundup here. Tonight's third guest, WeatherBrain, lives in Colorado. He's been fascinated by severe weather since he was a young boy growing up in Nebraska. Nebraska seems to have that effect on some of our friends. He is fascinated at capturing some of the video of severe weather, telling the story of those affected by events. Jeremy Hammond, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Thanks so much for having me. I might have y'all beat with dew point. I'm up in Longmont, Colorado, and it is 46.
Oh, we don't want to hear it.
Have a winner. We have a winner.
It won't be 46 in Alabama until late October, probably. But gentlemen, welcome to the show. We can't wait to dig into what you're doing, but we have a special guest we're going to talk to first. Going to deputize you as panelists as well. So use the chat if you want to say anything, or raise your hand to jump in at any point. And same for you, David, of course. But and if nobody answers, just jump in anyway. So I'll turn it over to Jen, who has a special guest for us tonight.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, our special guest tonight is a legend of Weather Channel fame. He spent 33 years as a lead forecaster and on-camera meteorologist for the Weather Channel. Tom Moore, it is an honor to have you on the show tonight. Thank you for being here.
Well, good evening. It's great to be here. Of course, the circumstances that I'm here, not so good, but love being with you guys.
Thank you. Well, we're going to have you back soon because we're going to talk about all of your previous Weather Channel exploits. But tonight we do have you on the show to talk about the life of another Weather Channel legend who passed away recently from complications of COVID-19, and that's Jeanetta Jones. And I found out about Jeanetta passing away after last Monday's show on your Facebook page, and it really hit me hard. I was immediately taken back to being in middle school and watching the Weather Channel every day, and specifically watching her. I loved her on-air presentation. She was smooth. She was motherly. She was calming. And she immediately became my role model. That's who I wanted to be as a broadcaster. And in 1997, when I first started at the Weather Channel Radio Network, I got a chance to meet her. And she was just as nice in person as she was on the air. And so I'm just, as many who grew up with her are heartbroken. So we wanted to have you on the show because you worked with her closely. You knew her. We wanted just to have you. We wanted to honor her life. So talk about Jeanetta and who she was, her background, her schooling, and what was she like to work with?
Well, she was a pleasure to work with every single day. I don't think I had 1 second, bad second with her. All the shows that we did, all the times that we interacted. She was on the recruitment team with me for the on-camera department, as well as doing shows with her. I remember her coming from Macon, Georgia area. Her parents lived outside of Macon, and she went to the University of Georgia, and she had mostly a broadcasting background. I know that she did spend some time in the Greenville-Spartanburg market, and she was working there. So she came to the Weather Channel with not a tremendous amount of meteorological knowledge, but she worked and worked and worked, studied, absorbed everything. And of course, she was with some great people, like John Hope, and I could go through a litany of the list of who we had there. All of them I loved, and I could never trade that for anything in the world. But Jeanetta was just so easygoing. She never had a bad word. She never got angry. She kept everything going. When you prepared the show, because you would have to prepare the show by putting slides like most on-camera people do, and then you play them, frame by frame back then. And she would load the show and never make an error. In fact, all the years that I did that with her, she made not one error. Every once in a while I could slip up. I made a few errors, but she never did. She was perfect. I go, how can anybody be that perfect? But whenever she had a segment that she wasn't that comfortable with, she would let me do it, like the tropical update, for example. But the ones that she did do, she was so prepared. Her delivery, her presence was just flawless. She was that good. She was one of the best I've ever worked with. And actually my favorite to work with was Jeanetta. And even after I left the on-camera department, she kept on with it until her accident, which we might get into. But anyway, she had great years there, and everybody liked her. You're not going to find one person, ever that worked there that would have a bad thing or even a negative thing to say about her.
She seems so joyful. It just like she really loved what she did. And are there any memorable stories that you can think of that you would mind sharing, whether it was, while working or, we talked a little bit earlier today, you're talking about going to a couple of parties at her house and you're at her wedding as well, right?
Yes. I attended her wedding. I think it was 1993, somewhere in there in the summer. And her father was a minister, preacher, Central Georgia. And he did the ceremony. He performed the marriage ceremony. And then they had a reception at the house, which was more like a country house. And outside of it, they had a side business. They had an ostrich farm. So I didn't know, but we were outside of the house and looking at all the ostriches. And I don't know, I'd never seen anything like it. So it's kind of funny. But it was a good reception, and we all had a good time. Talking about a party, I remember one party she invited everybody, and Jeanette was not a drinker. She's from a preacher's daughter and that type of house. And I remember, we got to the party, come in the door, and Jeanetta says to me, and I don't know why she did this. I by that time I was kind of almost past my partying stage, but anyway, she goes, I just want to let you know now that we have all soft drinks here, okay? And I said, okay. And but I said, Jeanetta, I don't need alcohol to have a good time at a party, okay. And so as we got into the night, Jeanetta always liked to hear stories of mine because I could tell stories. People like that, or some people like that anyway. But so I started talking stories about the Weather Channel from even the time before she was there. And we kind of gathered around and had a good night of it. And she really enjoyed that. One time, funny thing, when I was working on the air with her, I said, Jeanetta, this was maybe around 1989, somewhere in there. I said, Jeanetta, someday we're going to lose our jobs to robots. They're going to have some kind of thing that's going to be doing the weather. It might be looking like a human or it might look like a robot. And they're going to do all this. So we better enjoy it now while we have it. And so I stood out there in front of the chroma key during one of our breaks. And, I did like a silly robot imitation. I stood out there and went partly cloudy. And she got a big kick out of that. She started laughing, and I don't, that's kind of cheesy maybe, but she liked it. She laughed a lot at it and she really enjoyed that. She got a big kick out of that. And it's just, as I say, it was beyond the weather. It was beyond doing the show. It was just the experience of doing the show with her that I totally enjoyed every single time.
Yeah. but she worked at the Weather Channel for 20 years. And we'll mention just briefly that I didn't realize this until I started digging a little bit more and found an article about her accident in 2006. And it happened on Thanksgiving Day. And it was right outside the Weather Channel. And it ended her career. And didn't realize for a little while there until she started having memory issues that she ended up with a brain injury. Do you know much about that? And did you talk to her much about like what it was like for her to cope after that?
Well, she never really came back after that. So,
Yeah.
and I didn't see her, but as far as the accident, yeah, we all heard about it. There's a road near the Weather Channel called Windy Hill Road, and it's right there near Interstate 75. And I guess somebody was coming off of the exit, and they were a visitor from Germany, from what I remember. And it was their fault. Whoever's driving went through a light right there at the intersection, and it hit her. I think it was an SUV or something that she was driving. And it was really bad because I've heard that the vehicle flipped 3 times over and, rattled her around. And unfortunately, she did suffer a brain injury. And I remember limited her memory. So she was never able to drive again, let alone, come to work. So that was very tragic because it's like everything ends right like that.
Yeah.
I did hear that in the subsequent years, she did some inspirational talks. I guess her husband took her to those, and she was able to carry on like that. But her weather, her weather broadcasting days are over.
Yeah. I was very inspired today as I ran across her obituary, and then there was a link to the ministry that she ended up being a part of with part of her family, and she had some inspirational videos there from that were current. That so she was able to do. They were more like small Bible studies and inspirational. It was really neat to see her doing that, knowing how far she's come since 2006, since that accident. I was just as inspired watching her today as I was, when she was doing the weather. It was amazing. Did you have any interactions with her or knew that she had contracted the virus or anything like that? Did she talk about that at all? In the final days here?
Yeah, the only contact that I had was on Facebook. So she would post very, very spotty. It didn't, 2-3 times a year, maybe, and I would, and, especially about her daughter, when her daughter is like 26 now, but when she was in college and all that. And the last time that I had any interaction was Mother's Day. Her daughter had a post, and, I put, well, you have such a great mother. And she responded to that. So maybe a couple of times a year on a Facebook post. That was about as much as we corresponded in more recent years.
Okay, Tom, I appreciate you sharing with us. If anybody has anything else they'd like to share, this has meant a lot to me to hear more about her life. I really appreciate you being on here to talk to us.
Well, again, I'm glad to be with you. And unfortunately, the subject matter wasn't something that I really wanted to talk about. It's other than the fact that I just adored her. I really did.
Well, that really comes through, Tom, and we all adored her too. Anybody who was a fan of the Weather Channel, you say people that met her, nobody didn't like her, and I'm sure there was nobody out in the audience that didn't like her either, because she did a great job. But thank you for sharing that tonight. On a less serious note, and we're glad you're here as one of the legends of the Weather Channel. We'd like you to tell us one of your funny stories. And I know of one that was the Weather Channel's first live remote in 1983. Didn't go quite as well as was planned. Can you share any light on that event?
Oh, so you're reading some of yeah, I do a lot of those weather history stories. Yeah, we tried to dabble in things. It was very primitive. We could go the rest of the night about the early days of the Weather Channel, but
we're going to do that in coming weeks. We're going to do that. But,
I'll stick to this. Long before Jim Cantori and Mike Seidel were out covering hurricanes, we wanted to do something live. Somebody goes, you know what? This was in December, I think, of '83. Somebody goes, well, there's a lunar eclipse tonight. And I don't know who came up with the idea. it might have even been one of the control room people, but he said, you know what? We can set up, like a telescope on top of the roof of the old building, first building we were at. And when the time comes, it was like 11 o'clock at night or whatever it is, we'll show it on the air. We go right on, there we go, live shot. Great. So earlier in the evening, one of the control room guys went up the ladder, and with the camera equipment, it wasn't a telescope, I think it was a camera, but anyway, set everything up and pointed it at the moon at the time, and then came back down the stairs, and that was that. So, time comes for the eclipse, and they go, we are now going to show you for the first time outside the Weather Channel, a live broadcast of this lunar eclipse. Well, they went to the camera, and of course the moon moved. The moon moved. How could it do that? The moon moved. So the control room guy goes right up the stairs and goes to the roof and is moving around the camera. Now, in the distance, there was a Gulf gas station, and he's like, he's not really thinking about what he's doing. So he moves and he focuses it on the Gulf. The Gulf. Yeah. Remember the orange or the blue? The Gulf, yeah. And for a brief second, it was like, no, that's not it. And then finally we got to the moon. But he had a wisecracking lead forecaster, Al Lipson, who's also legendary, just passed away, unfortunately, this past year. And he would keep us laughing all night. And then he goes, hey, look, there's a Gulf station on the moon. Again, you had to be there, but like the whole room, you're working a late shift, and you need some of that. Well, anybody that's been a weather forecaster working odd hours needs a lift other than coffee. So, we all everybody roared at that, and that's what happened, basically, in a nutshell.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I bet John Coleman sent him a bill, sent BP a bill too, probably for that airtime. You think, Tom?
Well, that was after Coleman left in
that was after he
August,
left.
and this was in December. So he was gone.
Well, we can't wait to have you back. You're welcome to stay the whole show. It's going to be a really
I'd like to see what everybody has to say. Yeah.
And so you're deputized too. So please feel free to jump in at any place. Just jump right in and ask anything you want to ask. But we're glad you're here with us tonight. So,
great.
All right, I'm going to start out with Gabe Cox, and I'm going to let you say, Gabe, what is the Tornado Trackers, and when was it formed? And tell us a little bit about the background.
Sure. Yeah, we had a pretty humble beginning. Tornado Trackers, the name was kind of an accident. So in 2013, me and Jeff and Jeremy, we were all working at the same church together. And come to find out, we all love tornadoes. So we decided, hey, we've always dreamed about storm chasing. Let's try it out. We've watched enough videos. Maybe we can figure it out. And so we had a whiteboard session in the church and figured out what we were going to do, our game plan. And we went out. We wanted to keep our wives updated. So we found the Twitter handle. The only weather Twitter handle that could be found with tornadoes in the name was Tornado Trackers, which I honestly did not like the sound of. I was like, that's just not great. But we stuck with it. And that has become a brand of sorts over the years. It's been pretty crazy seeing what's happened in the last 8 years that we've been chasing together, seeing our footage get picked up by news stations and then documentaries. We've had air over Netflix and Amazon, BBC, National Geographic. It's been a wild ride for us, not at all what we expected getting into it. We just love the sky. We still do. That's why we go out. We're just amazed by what we see and want other people to be able to experience that too.
So Jeremy, I never imagined storm chasing as a ministry, but it sounds like you guys were going to the same church. Where was that? Where
that was it was in Austin, Texas. We were all working different jobs there. I was an intern, a lowly intern, and it was really like an oasis to find these guys, because when you have a strange hobby or you like a thing that many people don't like or aren't interested in, and you find that little core group of people, like all the people on this call right now. It was really sweet to find these two fellas, and we're kind of all the same similar personalities. And so I was like, oh, these guys are going to be my friends, I think, for a really, really long time. And that's just what sustained us, this friendship. It goes well beyond the weather. We are in each other's lives. We love each other a lot, and we've been through the ups and downs for sure together. So it goes well beyond it, and these guys mean the world to me. So I think we'll be together for a while too.
So Jeff, is this like a church social or something? You're sitting around just comparing tornado notes, or what? How in the world did that come about?
It really was pretty wild. The way that Gabe described it, we found, we probably had some responsibilities that day, but we decided to bump out of those, and we found a boardroom that wasn't being used, and we whiteboarded the whole day. It's one of those things where you're whiteboarding things that are unnecessary. Like, here's the things we're going to take: water. Like, you literally write down everything because you're so excited about the first storm chase, and you're getting to do it with other people. And I think that's probably for us what it was, having that peculiar passion that we all have, right? Now, we're all in here because we have that peculiar passion for weather, and to find people that have a like mind and like heart. It was like 3 light bulbs going off and going, let's just try this together. So it didn't take a lot of practice with one another. I mean, we started doing a lot of work in terms of learning meteorology and learning how to read radar and how to be safe when we were doing this hobby that's very dangerous. But we just kind of naturally spent time in the car, and it was just kind of an overflow of our time together.
So when was your first chase? When did you, and how much time elapsed from the whiteboarding session to getting out on the road?
Yeah.
Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take it. The day that our first official chase was, I think Gabe was back either in Austin or you were traveling somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. And Jeremy and I were in Moore, Oklahoma, and it was 2013, the Moore, Oklahoma tornado. And so we had stayed the night in a hotel the night before, and we knew there was going to be something robust that day. And that was the morning where I remember us being on a voice call, like a loudspeaker with Gabe, going, we need a name, and let's look on Twitter. So we're all on Twitter, the 3 of us, and we find tornado trackers. It was that elementary. Like, we are not professionals. We are not the smartest cats in the world. It was just a bunch of grown-up kids trying to find a Twitter handle. And it happened to be on a really destructive and really horrible day when it comes to storms and weather. And so that was the day it started.
So Tornado Trackers is a really good name in my book, and I'm surprised that it was out there. Were you able to get the domain too?
Yeah, the tornadotrackers.org was free. Someone scooped up. We waited a little too long to build a website, so by then someone had scooped up tornadotrackers.com, and they're currently holding it hostage still. But we have a .org we're happy with. We were just as shocked that Tornado Trackers was available. And to be honest, it's grown on me now. I hated it at first, but I've come to love it.
Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good name, I would say. So talk more about that day. That's a terrible day, obviously, a red letter day in tornado history. And you've alluded to it a little bit, but take us through that day. Who wants to start? Jeremy, you want to kick it off? And since you were there with Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. It was obviously, folks who are watching, listening, know the details of that day. For us, it was a day when we were still fairly, green in our chasing abilities and chasing skills. And we actually stayed south of Moore that day. And we saw that, the day was unfolding like it was in Moore, and the tragedy was unfolding. And we knew that we weren't cut out for something like that. And so we stayed away, and that was, that's a hard call that chasers, make every time that they're out, kind of judging and doing a self-assessment of, is this something that we can handle? Is this something that we should do? And so, yeah, Jeff and I stayed south that day. And I think when it happened, we obviously want to see weather phenomenon, and we want to be around it and document it. But that day was just different. Obviously, that's an obvious thing to say. And so we left that day, I think, a little with mixed emotions for sure. Yeah, still looking back on that, wonder, if that was the right call. I think it was. Just we couldn't have handled that, I don't think, at that point. So no regrets there. I don't know, Jeff, if you feel any different.
No, we weren't ready for a day like that. And there were two storms there. There was the one that hit more, and there was a really robust tornado warning storm just to its south. And we decided we'd go with the south storm. It felt like it was the right move. Thought it had the most energy, and it was our introduction to driving in the middle of hills that have zero cell phone reception and no radar, no access to our friend Gabe, who was looking at radar for us. Jeremy and I find ourselves in a hole of communication. And so we didn't even find out about what was happening in Moore for probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours later. And then once we saw that what was kind of undertaking just to our north, we decided not to go north with that. We decided to just kind of let it play out. We weren't ready for it. We weren't prepared for it. And I think that was probably wise. As much as you try to have this ambition of seeing a tornado, we knew that this is beyond our pay grade at that point. So we stayed back. Smart move.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here. Good to meet you guys. I was in Norman at the time in my last year of grad school. I worked at the National Weather Center south of Moore in Norman. And, it was one of those days where a bunch of people there's a lot of storm chasers around here, and everyone kind of had to decide when everything was coming together, and you kind of just know something that starts out in Newcastle, and with the way that things would track that day, head into the urban corridor. Is that something that you want to see? So is this some situation we feel like we can be safe in layer? And there's also this, is that why I'm chasing? And I think that's a decision everybody has to make for themselves, but I was certainly not comfortable doing that. I just had no desire to see, with the environment that day, a very probable, large, violent, destructive tornado go through the Oklahoma City metro, an area and people that I loved. And that's just, I listening to your decision, I feel like when you and others are confronted with that decision, I think that that's a pretty good one myself. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in with that, Bill, but please carry on with the story of your day.
That's important. These guys seem really level-headed, Kim, and I think that's refreshing. So in light of that, talk about the state of storm chasing today. Gabe, you kick it off. You guys seem to approach it a little differently. Talk about why that is and how that is.
Yeah. We get closer than some people would prefer. And it's a case-by-case basis. We're always situationally aware and trying to read the situation. There are opportunities when you can get close, but that comes with years of chasing tornadoes and knowing how close is too close. We've had close calls. And so we've had some really quick lessons in the past. You can hear about some of those on our podcast. But those were really important lessons for us as a team, and taught us, to be more aware of situations and be more prepared mentally also, going into storm chasing, and to make sure our motives were correct. Because you can get into, if you go into storm chasing with the wrong motives. I started out in 2016 thinking that I was going to make a career out of storm chasing because I had some successes. And ultimately that put me at risk because that was my driving motivator. It went from being passionate about storm chasing and seeing really incredible natural phenomenon to trying to make money off of it. And that led to some really bad decisions in 2017 that ultimately almost killed me. And so coming out of that season, I know for me personally, and Jeff was there that day in a separate vehicle, but I think that was a big shift for us as a team to kind of step back and reassess why we're doing what we're doing, and to take precautions a little more seriously, and to not tempt fate as much as we had in the past. There's a lot of videos that you see online, and a lot of it's not from storm chasers at all. It's just people who happen to be home and their home gets hit by a tornado, but you have that really close vantage point, and I think that drives people to want to get that vantage point. And there are some storm chasers that do that as well. And for us, it's kind of to each his own. That's not our motivation, is to get as close as possible. We like to be close just to get a clear picture of what we're filming, but not to the point where it's going to endanger us. And I think, again, that came with years of making mistakes and learning from them and moving forward.
I'd like to ask you guys a quick question about that. I think it's really interesting, almost auspicious timing that you got into chasing in 2013 and immediately kind of jumped into the mode of we've got to get close. 2013 was the year, shortly after the Moore tornado on May 31st, where we lost some very high profile storm chasers to a system that, you can get, no matter how much experience and expertise you have, you can get into a bad situation with just the right kind of storm that does the weird thing. So was that something that you guys considered and looked at and sort of said, oh, I think that we're actually okay? Or did it weigh on your heart and mind? What an interesting year to get into it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially I would say it weighs on our families' hearts, when they hear those stories. And we're accountable to them, right? Like we owe them us showing up again, and so it's a constant balance. It's a constant back and forth. And yeah, El Reno was so incredible, and I mean incredible just in terms of an anomalous event, that it's haunting. Yeah, because when is that going to happen again? Could that happen again when we're out there? Could a tornado behave in a different way? And so I think us continue to educate ourselves on how to chase and chasing best practices and just learning to follow our instincts, because our instincts want us to come home. They want to bring us back home. And so learning to trust ourselves in that way, I think that's personally kind of a creed of mine. I don't know. What about you fellas?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the reasons why us getting to chase as a team and as best friends, we get to speak into each other's world a little bit. And so there's always one of us, or maybe two of us out of the three, that are feeling a little more rambunctious about a certain storm. And there's always one at least going, hey, we need to be a little more prudent about this. And I think we're able to speak that into one another. And there's a couple ways to learn, right? Unfortunately, there's ways to learn on the hard way, where you keep running into a wall and you break your nose a million times. And you realize, I don't want to run into that wall anymore. Or you look at others who have broken their nose running into a wall going, I think I'm going to learn from that. And I think that's part of kind of our storm chaser community, being able to listen to one another and talk with one another, saying, what are things we can learn? And so one of the instances that Gabe is talking about is Canton, Texas, April of 2017. That was the first time that we had really chased in that East Texas, from my experience, at least, very similar to the southern region of lots of trees, lots of hills, poor visibility. But it was a really high octane kind of day, a lot of cape, a lot of explosive atmosphere. And Gabe and I find ourselves in a day where it felt like it was too good to resist. And we found ourselves in that moment going, we don't know what to expect, but it looks like it's going to be a great day. In the middle of the day, there we are in really kind of the worst terrain you could possibly be. And it was one of those situations where I think we look back at that day, and we can talk, Gabe can really talk a little bit about what happened that day, but we had to learn some hard things on our own. And that's a hard thing to say as a storm chaser, because the margin of error is life or death. And so this is not some little game where it's like you're not playing basketball going, the margin of error is you miss or you make it. But it was a hard lesson for us. It was very humbling. We had some really hard conversations with ourselves as a team going, what are we in this for? What is our hope? When do we say no? Like that's probably a great question to ask yourself as a storm chaser is like, when is it just wise to say no? Like you're always going to want to say yes to something magnificent in the skies, but when is it not smart? When is it not wise? What are some things we need to do together? So that was one of those days when we think about Canton, where it became kind of our El Reno. It became our day where we had to come face to face with some hard realities about how we're going to pattern the next 10, 20, 30 years, hopefully, of our storm chasing.
So tell us a little more about it, Gabe. You were there, so give us the lowdown on what happened.
Yes, I was there. I got into an interesting situation. It's actually a very complex story. It took us 2 podcast episodes to actually fully explain it. I'll try to do my best to give you the Cliff Notes version.
We got all night. We don't have to we got no
up,
hard
everyone.
out. Just James.
So, like I said, the driving motivation for that trip was to make a career. So 2007, I was like, all right, I got to make this happen. Lifelong dream. So it was, I had years of pressure behind it to make it happen, because that was something I dreamed about doing since I was 10 years old when I saw a National Geographic special on storm chasers, and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. So 2017, I'm trying desperately to make that happen. There's a setup that Jeff was talking about. We just happened to be in 2 separate vehicles. I was in a cheap car rental. And so we're finding out that this day is blowing up more than we had expected. We were expecting a squall line. We thought maybe let's time lapse something, but then we started seeing these individual cells popping up, and first tornado warning of the day went up. I said, this is it. This is my opportunity. I got to get in front of this thing. Race to the storm. The tornado dissipates before we get there, but we come across the damage path. We're some of the first people there. And I start filming it with my phone. I had just gotten a really nice new camera. I didn't want to take it out in the rain, so I took my phone out instead. And it wasn't more than 15, 20 minutes later that my phone died, had become waterlogged, just seeped right into the phone case. And so that was my only source of contact with Jeff, who was in a separate vehicle. My only source of weather information for the day. So radar, maps. I didn't know my location outside of Google Maps. And so I had to flag Jeff down and let him know, like, hey, I'm out of this chase. And at that point, I was extremely upset, because now there was another confirmed tornado. It was actually coming towards us, and I didn't have the ability to upload the footage that I needed because my phone was my Wi-Fi. And not only that, I couldn't chase safely. So I knew that I was out and I needed to be out. So I told Jeff, hey, let's park the cars. I'll hop in your car. That'll be the safest thing to do. You still have spotty cell reception. Hop in his car, and not more than a minute down the road, we realized, oh, we just left my rental car in the path of the tornado. I don't want to pay for that either. So turn around as quickly as we can, as there's now a confirmed mile-wide tornado heading towards us. It's probably just a few minutes from our location. Get back to the rental car, and I hop back in, and Jeff takes off. He actually had seen the tornado when we parked, and he took off down the road.
That's my bad.
No. Assuming that I could handle following him at that point. I was so mad. I cut the wheel and stepped on it to get out of there. And the passenger side tires got caught in the mud.
Yeah.
And got pulled into this flooded ditch. And here I am in a cheap rental car that cannot handle driving in the mud. And I'm stuck. And Jeff has taken off because now he sees this mile-wide wedge coming towards us. And I knew I had maybe 2 minutes at that point. And there was nothing I could do. I was completely stuck. And so I ended up grabbing my camera and making a goodbye video to my family. And then that's when I started to see, the small brush coming in through the air, the leaves, the small branches. And I knew, I was like, this is it. This is how I go. This is how this day went. And it was the driving motivator that got me there was trying to make a career out of it. And the fear of missing out and fear of, not living my dream. And so I sat there for 30 seconds to a minute, assuming that this mile-wide tornado was about to hit, which felt like an eternity. And it got crazy windy. I saw a little more of the vegetation flying through the air, and then calm. And I knew at that point somehow it had missed me. It turns out that at the end of its life cycle, the tornado turned north and then a little northwest, and just that little turn managed to keep my car out of the damage path. So then at that point, I knew I was safe. Someone pulled me out 40 minutes later. And I was like, all right, I got to go find Jeff now. I drive in the direction I last saw him go, and I come up to this mile wide EF4 damage path. And at that moment, my fear of me dying transitioned to, oh gosh, my storm chasing partner and good friend just got killed by this tornado. So I get out of my car and I'm running up and down this mile wide damage path looking for his mangled vehicle. There's flattened houses and barns. There's injured people in the road. Managed to get someone on a four-wheeler to get the people who were injured. But my focus was, I got to find Jeff and make sure he's okay. No way to communicate with him again. My phone's gone. And of course, I don't have his phone number memorized. Who does that these days? So even when I got a hold of someone's phone, the only numbers I knew were my wife and my parents, who were trying in the background to get in touch with Jeff. And so for probably 3 or 4 hours, Jeff and I couldn't get in touch with each other. The whole time I'm thinking he was killed. And the whole time I'm thinking, screw this. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not worth it. Finally, we managed to get a hold of each other. Jeremy was kind of our ground base and was able to get broken messages from both of us at some point. I was able to open up my computer and use another Storm Chasers hotspot about 4 hours later and called Jeff on Skype. And that's when I knew he was safe. And he had his own wild encounter that day, but it was such a important lesson for our team. It was a really tough lesson, facing my own death and then facing the death of a good friend, that it really put the reality of storm chasing in check for us. It caused us to step back and say, like, hey, this isn't just about, taking pictures of pretty clouds. This kind of stuff is really destructive. It's frightening. It's chaotic. There are people who are terrified of this. And we saw the damage and destruction and victims firsthand. And it was a good reality check for us. It was unfortunate that it had to happen that way, but it was such a pivotal moment for our team.
Jeff, talk some more about that, being on the other end of that situation.
Yeah, it really was a tale of two storm chase days, because when I left, I had this completely different experience. And I think our personalities came out a lot in this chase, because I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I'm a little bit of a unhealthy dreamer, where I'm in my own world thinking everything's fine. Like, I just naturally think optimistically, everything's good, and maybe once in a while something bad will happen. Probably the proper way to think is bad things can happen, so be on guard. So there I am driving away. I'm videoing this EF4 tornado. I drive north to Canton, and I think there were 7 or 8 tornadoes around Canton that day. So it was just this very localized outbreak. It was just really insane that it took place there. I find myself face to face with a mile wide EF3, a second tornado. I don't have very good reception. I don't have any idea that it's a second tornado. I think it's the same tornado. I mean, it was just one of those things where I got a bunch of a couple of tornadoes. Gabe is in a ditch. I'm not thinking that the tornadoes are hitting anybody. I think they're just in open fields. My best friend is over here thinking he just about died. So we have these stories that are so different. And it wasn't until, and he was staying at my house in Austin for about a month. He was storm chasing, and he was coming up from Florida for about a month at the time. And I remember us driving back to the house in separate cars, getting back home. He went to bed. I'm at that point thinking, hey, I got a couple tornadoes today. Can't wait to look at the footage. I have no idea what happened to Gabe. So the next morning, it starts to become clear that I bailed on Gabe on accident, that he went through a nightmare of a situation. I went and got him some breakfast tacos, because I felt like that's the first thing I needed to do to try to repair what was going on there. And
it worked.
And it worked. And we talked for a couple of days, and it really was one of those moments where I think one of the things about our team that I've always loved is we have a high capacity for compassion for people. We care a lot about people, and we care a lot about what storms do to people. I think when you have this passion for storm chasing, you put your own mind and your own self at risk. And that was the first time I think that we had to have compassion toward ourselves and our own families. Does that make sense? We'd always thought about how this might affect other people, didn't think it was going to affect us. And this is the first time we came face to face with storms affecting us. We felt fear. We felt the unknown. We felt what it meant to be when you hear you amazing meteorologists speaking to people who have a healthy fear of storms. We had not had that before because we've always been the ones chasing them. And we felt chased that day. Gabe felt chased that day. And I think this is the first time that we had some really hard conversations about, wow, this is what the ordinary person feels like. Storm comes through. They don't know the language. They don't know what to look for. They're looking around. They see clouds moving 100 miles an hour. They're freaking out. They don't know what to do, where to go. And I think that was a really humbling experience for us. And I hope that one of the things that we try to grow in is just, there's no room for pride. Like if you foul up, and you got to own it. And you have to speak really openly to one another about it. And so you can learn from it and not do the same thing again. I think we've done that. I think that's part of the story that we've been telling through our team. And that day shaped us in a lot of ways.
If that didn't try your best friendship level, that probably you probably can make it through just about anything else, at least storm chasing. Kim, talk about your chase experiences and how, I mean, that's really important. What the guys are talking about right there is really critical. Watching out for one another. That's a really important lesson that I'm sure came out of their hot wash.
Yeah, I bet it was. I'm really moved by your story because when I have gone chasing, and I put it in past tense now because I've recently had a couple of kids, and so it's been a couple of years since doing active chasing. But my friends and I, we'd usually have two cars, and so you do that tandem driving piece, and you watch out for each other, and always making sure that everybody's good is its own whole task, and staying in contact. You have to have multiple methods. It's a whole strategy. Your story though reminds me of a day that I was chasing with my buddies in Western Kansas in 2008. It was either May 22nd or 23rd. And it was one of those days you're out on Scout Road for whatever reason, just this road that we were on every day out there, which you can imagine then what the conditions of that road became when all the chasers converged on it for 2 solid days with these high precip storms, a dirt road in Western Kansas. But we happened upon a friend of mine who was going to start working at the Storm Prediction Center, Brian Smith. And he had worked with one of my chase buddies, was a forecaster at the Indy forecast office. They'd worked together, and we ran into them in a field, and he was with his fiance at the time. We said hi, then we all went our ways and kept chasing these very fast moving storms. Later on, we all were in the same spot. We were talking, and we went to leave, and we saw that Brian and his fiance their car wasn't moving. And we all decided, we needed to get out of there really quickly because some storms were coming, they were almost due north, moving storms, and they were coming at us at 55 miles an hour, tornado warned. We were in the way of the next round, and we needed to get out of there. And we packed them and their most valuable things in our cars. I think Brian might have been in our trunk, and he was like, let my fiance have an actual seatbelt. And we hightailed it out of there, and I think they were in their car or a rental. I think it might have been a rental to get across country. And we were very, very nervous. We didn't know if their car was going to make it. And then we came back and we found it was okay. It wasn't hail destroyed, but it hadn't been too far. So it's something that happens out there, and you do get in situations where your car doesn't work, and there is almost nothing more daunting feeling than being in the way of these storms that are very destructive and feeling stuck. So Gabe, I have nothing but the most sympathy for you and how that must have felt. I was so grateful that we saw Brian and his fiance in that situation, so we could get them out. And that it does take, Jeff, to what you were saying, it takes intentionality. You're so focused on the storms. There's just a lot to pay attention to, and I'm sure you guys can resonate with that. I'm interested now in the hearing about what it was like for your ground crew. So Jeremy, sometimes it can be so hard to not even be part of that and be the eyes on the ground. What was that like to, you were probably in a position where you were trying to make sure they were both okay and having a difficult time reaching them, and you saw what was going on. Talk about that. What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking that. I was at a going away party actually for myself. I was leaving a job to move, and so something I couldn't miss. I of course would have wanted to be chasing with my teammates, and so those are just the life things that happen, and you got to accept it. And so I'm at this party that's for me, and I'm trying to be gracious, but when these events are happening, we're all looking at our phones, like trying to sneak like radar, grabs and things like that. And knew what was unfolding, knew it was serious, had no clue the specifics of what was happening to Jeff and Gabe. It wasn't until a little bit later in that evening when Gabe's wife actually got a hold of me, and I started to feel and sense the kind of the desperation and maybe the fear in her, that I was like, oh, this is not normal, not great. And so that was really challenging, a really tough evening overall. Obviously, not to the same extent of what Jeff and Gabe were going through. I think I felt a certain level of kind of weird pride in just being able to help these guys connect, because just passing messages to each other. Of course, I would want to be with them and to experience that, but I was really thankful that I could serve that purpose that day. It wasn't a glamorous one, but it was one that provided a lot of emotional support, and that was really important. But just a overall, like, such an intense scary time. And it wasn't really until we recorded these podcast episodes a few months ago that like the wave of like emotions hit me as I was listening to it. And I kind of like experienced it with Gabe and Jeff then really, really intensely, and kind of part and parcel with how we make our show, including kind of audio clips from the video that we shoot. And in particular, Gabe recording, some of his goodbye message, like just, chilling, scary stuff that if anybody would record that, it would be chilling, but let alone one of your best friends. It really hit me like a ton of bricks, experiencing that. So like years and years and years later, after the fact, I'm like kind of catapulted back to that experience. So pretty wild instance there. But yeah, being the one back home has its own flavor of intensity as well.
Yeah, definite. Kim, what did you want to add to that? No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know you guys started chasing in the era of smartphones, but there was a day where we used to rely on people being in the, sort of ground truth spot, and they would give us, updates, especially if we were away from, a hotel where you could gank their Wi-Fi or a, gas station. You get to know all those places. You'd memorize all those places that you could go. But if you were away from that, you really needed that ground truth person. And I think in some ways that was the hardest thing to do. You're not getting to be on action, but you also feel that burden of responsibility for the people that you're sort of shepherding. And sometimes you're the bearer of bad news, and sometimes you're in that role of trying to be a crisis communicator. One of my favorite memories from my early chasing days for an undergrad, I was actually trying to chase in Indiana and central Illinois. I was at Purdue University. So you chase these, screaming squall lines going forever fast in the middle of the night, and you end up just coming home in lightning, and it's terrible. But we tried it, and we went and were chasing in central Illinois outside of Springfield one day, and there'd been a large wedge tornado. We'd followed the storm from the Missouri border into Illinois. And there'd been a large wedge tornado wrapped in rain. We'd kind of seen the rain shaft and thought, well, this is not nearly as glamorous as it seems on TV to try to do this. And we start driving back. I had left my car in Springfield and joined a car with two of my friends to go out west, and we were going to come back. And our ground truth guy was actually in California, working in Silicon Valley there. And he called us and he was like, where did Kim leave her car? and I said where I'd left my car and what the general area was. And he said, well, there's a report of tornado damage maybe 200 yards away from her car. And I was, freaking out. And of course, I was an undergrad, and a lot of the stuff for the car was, under my parents' name. So I had to make this phone call to my parents that was less than enjoyable, asking about the coverage on the car and, what would happen if it just happened to be in a place that got hit by a tornado that it wasn't supposed to be. We get there, and Springfield really got hit, and all of the radio stations were down except for one, because the radio tower where most of the radio stations transmitted through was hit. And there were two different tornadoes that had tracked through town. And we only were able to navigate around and get to my car because one of my friends was from Springfield. And he got us around the Walmart, and I'd parked outside of an Applebee's, and we didn't see my car at first because everything was black. It turns out that my car was under Walmart's roof. The Walmart roof had lofted and been on top of my car. And part of me thought, well, thank goodness, that God really was looking out for my car or me or something on that one. But also I was a little bit jealous of my car because they got to see more tornado than I did, chasing this rain shaft, screaming across Missouri and central Illinois. And that was not the last time that my car parked somewhere got to be closer to a tornado than I was actively chasing. But yeah, the ground truth guy, he was just like, let me know. I can't do anything, but I'm sorry for the bad news. So, the mid 2000s were a fun time for chasing and a very different vibe. And I don't know if you guys have done more of that. If you can speak to that, you just have some fun stories that can happen.
Yeah, I actually, when I think about Canton, that I've told the guys that it feeling helpless, like not having communication, it took me back to my first chase, which was the most accidental chase ever, most significant chase. It was the Gerald, Texas tornado. That was my first day of chasing ever. And I was ill prepared. This is one of those things where I went to college in Belton, Texas, which is about 10, 15 minutes north of Gerald. And I had nothing this is the kind of thing when you have men and women asking, how do you get into storm chasing? There's really wise ways to do it. And then there's other ways to do it. And I did one of those other ways. And I remember thinking back, like, I didn't have a way to call anybody. I didn't have any idea what was going on. I was driving from the north down south where I-35 was shut off. When you come through a grapefruit size hailstorm from the north to get to a tornadic storm that you don't realize is one of the most significant tornadoes in U.S. history, I had no idea about that. So it is a different thing to be chasing in those days or without communications than it is to be very well prepared and to have your team kind of being able to communicate. This is what's going on. This is what to be expecting, to be trained to some degree. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's actually, Canton reminds me of that day, because that was before cell phones were a thing that I could afford, at least at the time. So very, very interesting kind of perspective to have when you feel like you don't have access to people and communication technology.
Well, that's interesting that you bring up Gerald. Sorry, Troy, I'll just toss it to you by saying Gerald was 1997, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I'd had the impression you guys all started chasing together, around 2013, but okay, so you're talking about almost 20 years earlier, you'd started doing it.
Yeah, I'm old. So I'm old. I'm the older one. I'm 45. I was in college for my strong 6.5 year stint there for an undergrad. And so that was my first chase, but there was a good decade there before I was chasing other storms. It wasn't a thing that I was doing. It was, hey, there are tornadoes dropping down. We're having an outbreak. I'm going to get in a truck with my friend because we're stupid and we have no idea what we're doing. And we're going to go see if we can figure where things are going on. And everything was so low precipitation that day. You could see everything around you. There wasn't really, if you were south of it, you're fine in terms of visual. And they were slow moving storms, horribly dangerous, horrible day, but everything moving straight from the north to the south. And Troy, I'm sure, can speak to this and tenfold, just what a unique day of those storms never crossing I-35 from west to east. They just went straight south and even bumped a little bit to that southwest.
Yeah.
But
those days, Jeff, that was the day that I'll remember in the infancy of cell phones, like Kim mentions, that we learned the importance that day. And I will contend that it is as bad today as it was back then. We lost what little cell service we had back then. You had to have a pager or you had to be a ham radio operator in 1997 because the infancy of the cell system completely crashed with what was then a crappy system. And I'll warn people out there, this will happen again. In a major tornado event, you can look for those cell systems to crash. And that's why I think it's important we continue to encourage people that want to go the ham radio route. And I'll tell you, I still carry around the pager. I look like a drug dealer. That's not a show title, by the way.
Yeah, but show title.
No, but I still wear one of the AWACS City of Austin pagers. And I still to this day carry a pager with me just because I really believe that we're one tornado away from having the cell system crash in a local area. But in that way, Jeff, not much you could have done about it. But I just remember how frustrating it was to try to get a hold of people and up there on that tornado. And like you said, it was a very unique day.
And David Rodney, that happened in Tennessee this weekend, didn't it? I mean, the people in Waverly lost their cell service, right?
Yeah, there was the big problem. The 911 center was flooded.
Yep.
The cell towers were down. And so for several hours there, water and sewage wasn't working. The place was shut off. Escape routes were closed off by the risen water. So the place was basically an island. And it was very difficult to get I know a lot of the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency had to use radio to get communications into the EMs over there. And that was it. Nobody else could talk to anyone else. So not only are you dealing with the loss of life and the physical and rising emotional trauma, but it's compounded by the fact that you're cut off from any outside help. And it was a terrible thing for a long time over there on Saturday.
Yeah, so you can't rely on these little wonderful supercomputers that we carry around in our pocket. Tom Moore, you're listening to all this craziness here. You got any storm chasing exploits that in your past history?
Well, I didn't chase myself, but the current situation is they have a lot of resources now. But if you go back to 1997 or whatever, I'd be sitting at the Weather Channel and there'd be people that I knew from the Weather Channel that'd be out chasing. My phone would ring and they say, could you get me the current hourly observations of the following stations, like Hayes, Kansas? And they go down through a litany of a few, and I'd say, yeah, their wind is this. And so it's incredible. And I know all of you can really speak to the evolution of this over time and the resources that you have now compared to the good old days, or actually the bad old days.
Tom, did you work any of those big days, the Moore events, and back to Gerald, any of those times that stand out in your memory?
Yeah, I mean, we were there for almost all of them, and just tragic. We were following them minute by minute. We were covering them, and we go, tornado's going to come near a school, or things like that, and you knew what's going to, you know what's going to happen, and you just hope that somehow, people can get out of it with the least amount of damage and loss of life, and that's maybe a little bit of a curse when you're there looking at a situation and people reporting, and you have contact with the local TV stations and they're covering it, and you just kind of know what's happening, and it's up to God or whatever the fates.
Exactly. Jen Airmore, you do such a great job with your website telling stories. I got sucked into to one of your stories the other day on the Tuscaloosa to Birmingham tornado, and it's stories. It's about people. It's not just the stats and what the tornado did, but it's about the experiences. And there's a lot to be learned from those things. I have to congratulate you on doing that. I think it's a real reason to go to what you're doing. And I think you join me in saying, Gabe and Jeremy and Jeff, they do that too. They tell stories. Talk about that for a minute. Who wants to take it? Jeff, you want to lead?
Sure.
How are stories important to what you're doing?
Yeah, I think regardless of personalities, we're all narrative driven people. And I think for the three of us, like, we all have different abilities. Gabe is this extraordinary talent when it comes to videography and documenting. He just has an eye and an ear. He knows how to think through that. I think the way Jeremy and Gabe and I have kind of always lived, we kind of think through people's unique stories as individuals, as families. And I think even as we do our podcast, one of the things we're trying to do is take storms and say, we're not just going to talk about storms, but what are people's origin stories? Like, everyone has an origin story with storms. Like, whether people hate storms, love storms, hate weather, love weather, they have this kind of Genesis moment where they were introduced to storms in some way, shape, or form. And how did that affect them? And how do they see storms now? And I think that's one of the things that we try to do, is we're trying to get to the core of, like, honestly, without sounding weird about it, people's souls when it comes to weather and storms. Like, it speaks to life a lot. And you get to find out a lot about families, about individuals, about character. There's nothing better. I mean, I just saw a story today from the floods in Tennessee of an elderly gentleman who was watching the floods happen right in front of him from his house, and the water up to his shoulders. And the story he told was not simply about the weather event. It was about, this is how it impacted me. This is the way I'm going to come out of this. And this is what I'm going to do when I talk to people about it. And that, to me, is the most life-giving aspect of storms. And we always try to talk about, like, people think that storms are just always so awful, and they bring about so much awful consequences in a lot of ways, but man, they bring out so many riveting stories about people and community. And I think that's one of the things we're kind of love drunk on, is the stories of people and their nature that come through these kind of moments.
And
Well,
that's what y'all do so well.
Right. That's exactly right. Troy.
Exactly.
Thank
I mean,
you.
Jen and everyone up at Tornado Talk. Excellent.
Thank you, guys.
I found myself just going back and reading the stories multiple times, which is surprising for me. I don't like to do things twice. My time management side kicks in. You only touch it once. Not these stories. James was telling a story about a lady. The last tweet on her Twitter feed. James knows these people inside and out. He knows every story. He knows the stories from a storm. Because he's committed them to his heart. And one of this lady, who at a slightly previous event had, tweeted, "Oh, I hope, we don't have storms tonight, or I hope they don't come near our house." And that was her last tweet, and she died in and James, you probably can, tell more about that than what I can. But I found that very haunting and just terrible.
I was going to ask Jeff and Gabe and Jeremy. So you guys come from a church background, and talk about the spiritual aspect of this thing. Are you guys like bivocational? Do you still do ministry work? I mean, how does this all weave together, faith and storm chasing?
That's a great question. We're all in a little different place, I think, in our stories. Like life leads you in all different places. I think the spiritual aspect of storms have always been with us, and kind of interwoven through any sort of like practical faith. Just listening to everyone talk about just stories generally, I think the spiritual aspect of weather to me is kind of like is an aspect of proportion, right? Is this thing that I'm looking at come across the horizon, is gigantic, like in scale, and it is huge. I am tiny, like I am this tiny little ant beneath this storm. And there's just like this natural spirituality to it, whether I put a label of, any specific religion to it or not. There is, I think any human can connect with that spirituality. And so I think Jeff, Gabe, and I, yes, we did meet in a church building, and I won't speak for these guys on kind of what that is, but for them right now. But I think I've always felt that, even from as a tiny little kid, like in Nebraska, underneath, giant mesos, rotating mesos. It kind of just puts you in your place. And I think that's essentially the soul level, heart level feeling that connects the three of us together. So I think there's a spiritual side to it, whether you label it under kind of a religion or not. But I don't want to speak for Jeff and Gabe on where they're at with it right now either.
Gabe?
Yes.
Boy, you guys are quiet. Well, I shut him down with this question. Wow.
No,
Come on,
I'm
Pastor.
trying to
I mean,
withhold.
I know
Hey,
you
trust
got
me,
something to say.
I can talk nonstop, so I'm telling myself don't talk the whole time.
I know Jeff has a story for this one. So. No, Jeremy hit the nail on the head. I mean, for me, Supercell is my cathedral. Like I come alive when I'm around storms, and I feel like Jeremy said, just it's a spiritual encounter, and you kind of feel it. I hesitate to say you feel insignificant, because that sounds like a bad thing, but I think you feel significant and insignificant in the same hand when you're faced with this really powerful force. Even if it's not a tornado, just a supercell. Seeing these amazing towering clouds taller than Mount Everest spinning in the sky in front of you, like it just does something to me. And it always has. My parents have a picture of me at 3 years old falling asleep outside watching clouds. Like that's just something that's been ingrained in me for whatever reason. And I think knowing that it's been ingrained in me for so long, I'd put a lot of emphasis on purpose and storm chasing and being around the weather, and it's evolved over the years. But I think just being around that community of storm chasers, and also being in the communities that are affected by storms. Storms are beautiful. I think inherently, it's only when they intersect with humanity that they become this dark thing. And so I think for us as a team, we've talked about it a little bit already. We have just such a heart for people, and we have various backgrounds in grief counseling and disaster relief and pastoring. And so we really, really care for the communities that we find ourselves in during and after. And so, for me, on this journey of finding purpose and why I'm so obsessed with the sky, even from an age when I didn't choose at 3 years old to become obsessed with the clouds. It just was something that was in me. And so just continuing on that journey, like Jeremy said, we're all in different places. And for me, I'm still figuring out, like, okay, like I can do storm chasing, but why? What am I gonna contribute to the world through that? And for me right now, it's not only capturing the story of the atmosphere, which is changing, but also the story of these communities that are impacted by the atmosphere. And so for me, it's being able to offer some sort of visual aid and story to the ongoing narrative of the sky.
I mean, we're people of tension. I mean, if you love severe weather, you're a person of tension, and you hold the beauty of the storm and the tension of what it can do. You can't have one without the other. And I think we've had to come to a place of going, we don't feel guilty for looking at a radar loop of a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico, because it's gorgeous to look at. And at the same time, we're going, this is going to bring about some really difficult stories once it hits land. And I think the three of us it's an ongoing conversation for us of how is it that we love something that can do so many things that are harmful, and yet I think we have to hold both of them together. We have to work in that tension, and it is a tension. And there's some days after Canton, Texas, where we have regrets and we have doubts. And there's other days when you see a mile-wide tornado in the middle of a field that doesn't touch anything but daisies, and you are cheering beyond belief. And it's just a weird thing. It's this weird tension that we go back and forth with. And so I think that's probably going back to the place of talking about people's stories and their narratives, because that's people are encountering things that are beautiful and frightening at the same time.
Well, here's my take on it. I do children's worship. I mean, nothing personal. Adults are just too stinking weird. Okay. I mean, my parishioners happen to be between the ages of 5 and 12, and they're outstanding. I mean, you know, they understand sarcasm. They think I'm funny. It's you know, they don't smell bad yet. It's just a great audience. And I tell them the only thing that really matters is your relationship with God and how you treat other people. And that's it. And I believe that everything we do in this business should be a ministry. I said this business, any occupation really. And I think for everybody here, you have to have a servant's heart to be successful. We are here to serve others. We are here to help people. That's the reason I'm here. I think for some reason I was born to be standing in front of a green wall when there are tornadoes flying. I don't know why, but it's just the way it is. And it just seems like you guys do. And you've said this over and over, you've got a heart for people. And I wish everybody had that same attitude, because I see a lot of folks in the field and it's just like they don't even care about the people that live in these, you know, hard hit areas. A lot of them do, but I've seen some that don't. And you guys are the type that would seemingly stop and actually help somebody. If a tornado hits a community and you're there, and you're not going to go chase it trying to get video, you're going to go help try and rescue somebody. And it's refreshing to see that you have an emphasis on people. That's why we're here.
Yeah. And I want to get back to David for a second, because my story is interesting, David. This weekend, when I had several people reached out to me about Waverly, and I go back to 1978, to February of 1978, when I was in Corinth, Mississippi, James and Bill, and working for the Alcorn County Sheriff's Office in North Mississippi, and for WKCU radio, which was a mutual broadcasting. We rebroadcast the mutual broadcast news at the top of the hour. And on the 22nd, that train derailed, David, in Waverly. And then 2 days later, and a day before incident management and things like this and emergency preparedness, they began to dig to one of the propane. Read about this. It's well documented on the web. And they started digging and found a buried propane tank that was very hot. And they tried to water it down, and that tank then exploded in downtown Waverly. And that happened at 1:24. I always remember that afternoon, the 24th of February of 1978. It had snowed in that area of Tennessee the day before. There was a little snow on the ground. And Mutual Broadcasting called me, and I went to Waverly, drove up Highway 45 out of Corinth and went to Waverly, Tennessee. And to this day, I still remember that city completely burned. I still see that image nowadays. And this weekend, David, when I saw the stuff in Waverly, it flashed back on me about that event. And I actually went to the web with a friend yesterday, and we went and looked at some of the black and white pictures from Waverly, and the police chief, fire chief, a number of officers were killed in that explosion back then. Tell me that, David, that we at least have, for the people in Waverly, tell me that we're getting some of the communication back now. Tell me that we've got some cell towers they put up trying to get back in there and at least be able to communicate with people.
Yeah, Troy, they're overwhelmed with support. The governor, Congress people, the president of the United States have all pledged support. The volunteer support has been overwhelming. There's news was reporting today, there's a several hour long line wait for volunteers. It's very, I mean, we saw it in 2010. We saw it last year with the tornado. There's to calm your fear, the cell towers were restored. The 911 center was restored. The reunification center was established that day. The list of missing persons was around 40. Early yesterday. So maybe 48 hours ago, that number is down to 12 now.
Okay, good.
Which means people are getting on their phones. They're finding out which high school to go to, and to connect back with each other. So,
David, this event is going to eclipse the 1978 event. I think 17 people were killed in the explosion, but this event will eclipse that as the worst disaster for Humphreys County and the Waverly area, right?
It will. If it already has, Troy.
Okay.
It's 22 fatalities so far, with 12 people unaccounted for. And like most, the explosion was a little different in the demographic of people that it killed. Here, it killed the most vulnerable. So, mostly elderly, mostly children. Of course, that flood did not discriminate. But this is, and the fear is that the toll is going to rise. We've got emergency management people talking about, they stop saying the word rescue and they start saying the word recovery. Yeah. So it's already there. And frankly, I think, that in the May 2010 flood, which was most of Middle Tennessee and parts of Kentucky, the fatality number was 25, I think. Yeah, it was 25 people. That's across all of Middle Tennessee and part of Kentucky, which is, a couple million people probably. This is a town of 4,300 people.
Yep.
And it has more, it might end up being more fatal.
Well, this event, as I understand it, David, one of the TVA Tennessee Valley Authority rain gauges up there. This will be what, 1,000-year event? I mean, the reoccurrence interval for something like this is over 1,000 years.
Yeah, it's way off the scale, Troy. The latest number of 1726 is not official; it's pulled back. So the official total, as far as I know right now, it's not final, is 17.02 in 24 hours. The rainfall rates were incredible. The 12Z sounding was in Nashville, which is a fair piece away, but it was the PWatt was 2.37. The climatological max for that date is 2.21. Just an incredible amount of moisture, of latent moisture that just got released along the stationary front.
So let's time out here. I want to talk more about the meteorology behind this thing after the break, because it is a fascinating case study in many different ways. And I've not had a chance to go back, and I know that David has obviously studied the whole thing, but let me play one bit of audio real quick. Tell see if Tom recognizes this. Listen to this.
Welcome back to Weather Center. Rich Johnson.
And I'm Jeanetta Jones. 20 minutes past the hour. Here's your weekly planner. And you know what that means? Yeah, that's right. The holiday, the 4th of July. Thanks, Rich. Yeah, the holiday weekend is upon us.
Recognize that voice, Tom?
Oh, yeah, Jeanetta and Rich Johnson doing the show together.
But Jen shared the little YouTube clip of that. We'll put the YouTube clip in the show notes.
They were good friends. They knew each other better than some other people would know her. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear her voice. And again, we thank you so much for being here. But we do have to take a quick time out. We're going to go to Tony Rice for his astronomy report. We're going to have Jen's This Week in Tornado History. We'll come back and talk more about the Humphreys County, Tennessee flood tragedy. We'll do the weather roundup. We will have the picks of the week. Everybody on the show here, fair warning, you got to have a pick for us, something weather related, and much more. All coming up as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Something interesting happened with the Perseid meteor shower earlier this month. Its peak the evening of Thursday, August 12th into the next morning went pretty much as expected. Most folks saw a few dozen meteors per hour from reasonably dark locations. Meteor rates are usually about 50% lower on the nights before and after the predicted peak, but not this year. The real show, quite unexpectedly, happened the following night. All sky cameras from California to Ontario, Canada, were littered with streaking meteors between 0600 and 0900 Universal Time, according to a report by the International Meteor Association. One of those cameras in San Diego recorded more than 900 overnight, while another in Iowa recorded more than 1,000. Meteor showers are produced by dust and tiny debris that's left behind when a comet, in this case 109P Swift-Tuttle, the largest known object to make periodic passes near the Earth, as it races through the inner solar system. This last happened in 1992 and has been recorded over 2 millennia. We're not quite sure what caused this recent outburst, but it's likely due to a filament of dust that was left behind relatively recently, probably not 1992, perhaps back in 1862. Now, there's a lot about astronomy that is predictable, but nobody can say with any certainty what a meteor shower will be like. Those dust trails are pushed and tugged unpredictably by the gravity of the Earth, Moon, and Sun, along with massive planets like Jupiter and Saturn. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a tropical depression formed on August 26, 1978. It formed between the merging of an upper tropospheric low and a tropical wave near the Yucatan Peninsula. This depression was upgraded to Tropical Storm Deborah on August 28th and made a landfall in southwestern Louisiana on the 29th. It was a disorganized system, but numerous tornadoes developed across the Deep South, including a quick-hitting F2 in South Memphis, Tennessee. Per the storm data narrative, the path was only 2 miles long. Most of the damage, though, was confined to a half-mile stretch lined with fast food restaurants. A Wendy's and a Pizza Hut were destroyed, and a steakhouse was damaged near the corner of Chambliss and Elvis Presley Boulevard. 80 automobiles and parking lots of various businesses were damaged. There were no fatalities and 26 reported injuries. We have a summary on this event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
So let's go back to David. And David, if you would, just kind of give us a little meteorological discussion of the setup of the flood in Humphreys County Saturday morning and the warning process and how the whole thing worked.
I feel like the least qualified person ever to appear on WeatherBrains to answer that question, James, but I'll do my best. There's a stationary front that's set up. If you pull the water vapor imagery, you can see all the rain formed right along a boundary that went from north of Paducah. This thing extended all the way from southern Illinois, straight down through western Kentucky into western middle Tennessee. And it started in the middle of the night after midnight, and it just started raining. The rainfall rates were 3 inches an hour at times. This was well forecast. There was a flash flood watch that had been in effect the day before. There was plenty of social media stuff out on it, pinpointing really the area. The Weather Service did a great job of identifying where the threats and the risks were. And James, it just never stopped. I mean, like I said before, the PWatts were way above what we normally see around here, way past the maximum. And the rain, if you go back and look at the radar loops, it's 55 dBz reflectivity constantly. And the storms did what they do in every flood event, which is they trained. And they also moved really, really slowly. There was some hope that the axis that had set up from Paducah into Kentucky, into middle Tennessee would shift a little bit to the east. There was some hope. Sometimes they'll do that where the northern end of it will kind of slide the storms and shift them some way, but they didn't. They just stayed on that boundary. And the good reason why they call it a stationary boundary, that thing did not move. And so it rained in the middle of the night when it's, school's back in session in Waverly and everywhere else in middle Tennessee. It's a Saturday morning. It's been a stressful week. You waking up and it's raining. In Waverly, if you actually look at the MRMS data in real time, which by the way, it broke our color table. It was exceeding our color table. We had to make a new color table in the middle of this event just to see where the gradients were. But there's a pretty sharp rainfall gradient between Waverly and McEwen. McEwen is a town 10 miles to the east of Waverly. And McEwen sits about 400 to 500 feet higher than Waverly does. And if you've never been to Waverly, I know Troy's been there, but I've spent many afternoons and mornings there myself for work. Waverly is flat. It sits at the bottom of the valley. So you've got to the north hills, to the south hills, and then to the east, you've got a town that's got the bullseye for the highest rainfall. That is where the single day record for rainfall in Tennessee was set. It destroyed the other record by just almost 4 inches of rain. They ended up with 17.02 inches of rain in that day, most of which fell in the early morning hours. So what happened is all that rain in that basin, is sliding down the hills north of Waverly, south of Waverly, and it's going into a creek called Trace Creek. If you go to Google right now and look at maps and look at the satellite view, you can't hardly see it. It's that dry thing snaking right through the middle of the town. It's very rarely has any rain in it at all. That creek had flooded in the May of 2010, in the Great Flood, but it flooded very slowly. It's very gradual. The stories from the people on this flood said around 7:20 or so, depending on where you were, the water came up very, very, very quickly. Some people their accounts varied on how quickly because it was a function of how close they were. They lived to the creek, but most people said it was 60 seconds between the difference between it was just soggy outside to I had 3 to 5 feet of water rushing through my home. So what the water did is it took everything with it, the cars, the sheds, the mobile manufactured homes. It took the site-built homes that maybe weren't anchored as well as maybe they could have been, but it took those with it too. Nothing was unscathed. Those houses that remained stuck to their foundation were gutted like a tornado hit it. The residents were discussing it and saying it was like a mini tsunami. And these aren't the meteorologists or the EM saying, these are the people who lived it. It was a mini tsunami, they said. It was like a dam broke. The mayor says it came with the quickness of a tornado. That's the mayor of Waverly, is a quote from him. This storm swept people out into the river. The witnesses saw the various things, but they saw all your stuff. I mean, everybody's seen flood footage from flash floods. This is on a much bigger scale. The cars and stuff are going by, the homes are going by, the stuff you see on the news are like the big buildings going by. But what we don't have a lot of footage of is the people that were going by. There's one man on a bridge who saw 2 little girls and their puppy on a piece of floating something going by. And he added, that was going too fast. The current was going too fast for anybody to get him. There's another man, his name was Scott Kilburn. Scott jumped into the river because he saw an elderly woman in there. Tried to rescue her. Scott did not survive. There's a rancher at the Loretta Lynn Ranch down there. There's a photo of him clinging to something. It's the last photo anybody ever got of the guy. He was killed in this thing. You say flash flood. Most people, when they think flash flood, they think it's going to gradually come, but this is coming in 60 seconds. One lady's interviewed. She's living in her home and she sees that the floodwaters are going up. Of course, the flash flood warnings have been going out since 3:29 a.m. This thing's upgraded to a considerable tag at 6:09 a.m. This is before the water's coming rushing through Waverly. They know they need to get out. She says, I wake up, I see that the water's coming in. So I go and put some like the medicine and the clothes and stuff I need to get out quickly. I go put it in my SUV. I go back inside the house to go get my children and get them dressed so I can get them out. By the time I look out the window, the SUV's flooded. I can't get out. I'm stuck. There's stories of women, mothers who are holding there's one lady who's holding a 2-month-old or a 2-year-old child. She's got the child wrapped up and she's got 4 other kids that she's got to watch. And she's holding on to the clothesline outside. How many more of these are we want to say? A lot of these kids, the lead story for the first story there's a lady and her husband is grabbing their 2 7-month-old twins. He's holding them. He's doing everything he knows to do because this thing has happened on a lazy Saturday morning and suddenly there's a river going through his house. He's swept out and he can't hold the kids. The kids perish. Their names are Ryan and Riley Willoughby, 7 months old. Okay, these are just a few of the 22 people. So how did it happen? I mean, you've got a town that's flat, that sits at the bottom of a valley. You've got a rainfall gradient that sets up between the highest point that feeds the Trace Creek and where they are. And it's just coming immediately at them. And it just pours and pours and pours and pours. And then they call for help. I mean, the people who survived this flood went from one buoyant object to the next, to go from, and frankly, I went down after Katrina because I went to high school in Gulfport, and I heard the similar stories from the survivors there when the storm surge came in. There's one lady who posted on Facebook. It's Facebook Live. It's out there. Her family wanted everybody to see her last minute and 10-second broadcast on Facebook Live. She's trapped in the second floor of her home, and they escape. She escapes with her son. She goes up on the roof. The roof starts to float. Then the roof collapses. Her son survives. She doesn't. People in storefronts, instead of going out to get out, they're going up through the tiles and up on the roof. One lady's got a story. She's got a 4-month-old baby. She's standing, James, on her kitchen counter, and she's put the baby on top of the cabinets, that little space right there between there and the ceiling. And when the water hit her ankles, she breaks out the window, and they go out that way. They survive. How? Her brother kayaked over there, pulled them out with a kayak, and then found a boat. Another lady was found. She ended up clinging to a second-story structure. She's rescued by helicopter. Why? Because in this flood, there's a photo of the ambulance that was trying to get somewhere, and it was driving through waters, and that water was flooded out, and the road was gone, and it crashed. I mean, the emergency rescue vehicles can't get anywhere because this river runs right through the middle of town. The thing to know, and to really get a sense of this, if you're listening and you care at all about what happened, just go to Google and look at the satellite view, and you can see that creek. And you can see there's an east-west highway that parallels the creek. And to get into the town, you got to go south of the highway, or north if you're going to the north side. And all of those access roads are shut off. The water stops working. The cell stops working. 911 call center's down. Nobody can help anybody. It's every man, woman, and child for himself. And they're just swept away. I mean, I am interested in the meteorology in this. The all-time record on this was 13.52 inches in 1982. This beats it by 3.5 inches, and it puts the rain in the worst spot. To answer your question about the meteorology, the HER was running at 0Z the night before. So the Saturday 0Z run, which, as everybody knows in Central Time, gets here about 8:35 or so, depending on where you're getting your model data. It's painting a 4 to 5 inch swath of rain for this entire event, southeast of where it actually occurred, across I-40, displaced from where it was. The 8Z HER, so 8 hours later, it doesn't do much better, but it's exceeding the color table on pretty much every model source that we've got. I mean, for one thing, we got to do better with the color tables, because if we're maxing out on color tables on these floods, we got problems. I mean, there's a really big difference between the 7 to 9 inches that we got in Nashville in late March, that 4 people in Metro Nashville died from a flash flood, and the 17.02 inches that happened in Humphreys County. It's a huge difference. I mean, you're talking about in Tennessee now. Henry Rothenberg at Channel 5 posted an image which told a great story. 30 flash flood deaths in Tennessee in 2021. 30. There are 36 else in the entire country. And they're not done locating the other 12 people they can't find. Yep. This is worse by loss of life than the 2020 floods, the 2010 floods. I'm sorry. It's close to the death toll from the tornado. And I got to tell you, the tornado is the one that's the sexy one that everybody's all worried about. No, we really got to give all the attention to the tornadoes. And nobody wants to talk about the flash flooding. And these aren't people that got out in their cars and tried to drive through across a bridge they shouldn't have. These are people who are watching Scooby-Doo at 7 o'clock in the morning because they didn't have to go to school today because it was Saturday. And it was raining much, much harder 10 miles down the road. And that's, they're still getting flooded no matter what, don't get me wrong. but this stationary front wouldn't move. And by the way, the rain stopped midday and then it cranked back up. And that's what put it over the record.
Yeah.
I mean, it rained hard. There was a tornado warning a county over. With on Hopkinsville radar, there's a dual pole shows a TDS for a scan. Weather Service got a tornado warning that thing. So, I mean, what a day. It's just unbelievable. I don't know what the answers are. I'm not that guy. I'm not Kim, who's 5 times smarter than I am, who studies this stuff. And I'm not saying you have all the answers either. But to ask what happened, these people were coming. One guy's coming home from work from Waffle House, and he can't get home. One guy went to the hospital for something else, and instead of rescuing his own family, who has a 2-year-old that they now can't find, finds himself in a boat rescuing strangers, an elderly couple that's sitting out in the floodwaters. I mean, this is and look, I get Henri is going on in the Northeast. I do. I mean, I get it. And they're getting a lot of rain, and that's dangerous for sure. And frankly, I don't get the feeling that this has gotten less attention. I turn on the national news and I see it. But my worry is we're just going to say, well, it was 22 people.
Yeah.
Man, these aren't people who you say, well, they made bad decisions. Who cares? These are people who just woke up to a flash flood catastrophe with all the warnings that were going on. And they're in Waverly. It's a flat valley and all that water poured down. So, I mean, I had all these great notes and I've just blown right through.
No, the stories are the important part.
They're
David, talk for a minute, because I was up early watching Henri, and I have to hand it to the Weather Channel because they broke in with the flash flood warnings. Of course, most of the coverage was the hurricane or tropical storm, but they did cover the event. They did cover the warnings, especially the flash flood emergencies. But there, you wake up in the morning, your weather radio goes off on a Saturday morning. You're probably going to turn it off. This wouldn't have helped in those cases, it sounds like. I mean, when did you know how bad the tsunami effect, the Johnstown type flooding was happening? Because when you see a bridge blocked with debris, where there are sheds and all these things you were talking about, where the bridge is completely blocked by the debris, that's a serious flood event.
Yeah, Bill, I was asleep at midnight up at 5 a.m. because I was worried. For those of you who don't know, we run at Nash Severe WX, which covers metropolitan Nashville and Williamson County. I was worried personally that this thing was going to pivot into Williamson County. That was the concern. So I'm up, I'm on no sleep because I'm worried. I'm getting calls from people with the soccer association. Are we going to rain out in Franklin? There's a tournament over county over that I help people out with rainfall forecast, whatever. Everybody's waking up, Bill, thinking this is a regular day. And I turn on the water vapor imagery at about 5 a.m. and I look at some of the model data and I'm like, that's a lot of rain. But who thinks about, I wasn't looking out for Waverly, but the first report that I saw came in a little bit after 8 that something really terrible had gone on. And that was the confirmation. That was after the flash flood emergency. The flash flood emergency came in before the first report that I saw come in NWS chat indicating something really terrible had gone on. So to answer your question, I mean, how do you know exactly how this is going to happen when nothing like this has ever, as far as I know, been modeled even that it can occur?
And when I heard there was 11 inches in McEwen, I mean, that's extreme.
Yeah.
And then to find out later there was over 17 inches, that's just absurd.
Yeah, the rates, I don't want to say
this is Hurricane Camille in Virginia territory. I don't know what happened in the Shady Side, Ohio flash flood. Jen, you may be very familiar with that, but of course it was a very deadly flash flood. And this is probably the deadliest flash flood since San Marcos, Texas in 1998. Troy, you might remember that one.
Yep.
Yeah, Bill, this was 9 inches of rain in 3 hours. 9 in 3 hours. So as we all know, the rate is as important as the raw total. That's what did it. And I mean, if I'm in Waverly and I don't really understand how water basins and hydrology works, I'm going, we've seen this much rain before. I mean, yeah, it's a lot, and the creek's going to be up, but that's a far cry from a tsunami coming through, because double the rain is pouring into the Trace Creek to our east, and it's coming this way. So yeah, it's 20 to 25% of the annual rainfall that occurs in a day. Where's the metric for that? The only thing I could think of is Harvey in Houston and Southeast Texas. Troy, what was it? Some of the stations had 50 inches, and what was that in 3 days? I mean, that's 17 inches a day. Except here, it's exacerbated by these flood plains and these bowls, these basins that fill up with water and channel all the water into one place. I mean, all the water in that area drained into Trace Creek and came through that town. It's a catastrophe.
David, anything else right.
No, I mean, every time I'm on here, I get this whole thing, just talking about it out loud winds me up, because I've been thinking about it all day. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I just want people to understand that this is a fascinating subject in terms of how something this extreme can occur. But man, don't miss the stories of these people. And because when ultimately what fascinates us as a weather community and what motivates us as a social science community working with the weather community are these people. Because at the end of, I mean, the property is going to do what the property is going to do. The property is going to get flooded and carried away. That's fine. We can insure and reinsure and fix that and pay for it. But man, we can't fix these lives. I mean, it's not just going to be the trauma of the loss of life. It's the PTSD that's going on. It's a whole generation that's going to be afraid. And listening to the tornado guys on here talking about telling the stories, man, if the stories shouldn't just motivate you, they should inform you.
Absolutely.
What is it that we need to do? So I don't have any answers. I mean, I appreciate the invitation to come on and talk about it. It didn't happen to me. If I got a flash flood emergency, would I run out the door? No, that's the last thing I'd probably do. I'd open my window and look outside and go, it doesn't look that bad. And that's exactly what these people did. They said, and then
had no chance.
5 minutes
Kim,
later, it's a river. Yeah. So I'm sorry.
Dr. Kim, no. Dr. Kim, stories are so important in helping motivate us in the future. Talk about that for a minute. And I know you wanted to say something really important there.
I mean, stories are important for motivating. And as has been discussed earlier, a narrative, we're all driven by narrative. You guys have all been so great at talking about that tonight. I feel like with flood threat, I'll just be vulnerable about this. This problem, it makes me feel very helpless. And I think there's nothing that we can do to grow until we actually confront those feelings. Jeff, earlier you're talking about, being people in the tension. And sometimes I think we need to let ourselves sit in it instead of just maybe turning away and thinking this is intractable. What can I possibly do? But there's so many things about it that are hard. The water coming down from the sky in a place that ultimately, goes and it flows on the land surface to some other place. You can be in a place where sometimes you don't get any rain at all, and then you get a flash flood. That happens in Colorado, all the time. They have these really strange situations. You don't just look at this community. It wasn't just the floodplain per se. Not that anyone necessarily even knows that they're in the floodplain. There's so much garbage that's sort of tied to how people even get informed that they live in a place like that, and only a fraction of the people who are supposed to know, even under those circumstances, do. But it's not just being in a floodplain; it's being in a floodway. It's not just the lowest point where water can accumulate. It's also where water moves over the surface to get to that low point. And so, there's so much about it, about even just characterizing the threat that is difficult. If you're thinking from a psychological point of view, something that you can pick out as a signal from the noise of ordinary life, and where you say, oh, that's something I should respond to, and I know what I'm looking for. We are just almost helpless in the face of something like that. We don't have a good surface observation system to tell us where water's moving across the land surface. I was thinking earlier today when we were hearing all these stories from people who were in mobile manufactured housing, like you were talking about, David, there's all this vulnerable housing in the floodways, because as a society, that's where we put vulnerable housing. It's the cheaper land. And so that's where these structures tend to go. And I asked, do we even know if people tend to fare better in flash floods in site built, homes? Do we have any statistics on this? We don't. We know this for tornadoes, and there haven't been a whole lot of studies, but there's some where we can kind of do comparative fatality statistics and try to argue for, you should be in this kind of structure, not that one. So if you're thinking about trying to message for the flash flood, like, oh, maybe it'd be better at least getting to a home that's site built so you can get up on the roof, and it's not going to float down the stream. We don't actually know. We don't know. It's like we haven't either looked it in the face and said, okay, I'm going to try to take this apart into little pieces and see what I can get, or it's so hard. It's so hard, and these stories are crushing. They are crushing, especially as a mother of young children this age, of what you've discussed, and it's hard. I don't like to leave things on sad notes, but I really feel like it's a nice moment for our community to confront those feelings that I'm sure are well shared, and to sit in those and to think, can we try to peel back even little pieces of this? If we flooding doesn't get the attention. It's not the sexy hazard. It's the one that kills the most people in these horrible situations where they have done nothing wrong. And we need to do better. So I just really appreciated everything, David, that you said. I thought it was brilliant. And if you ever felt like I was, oh my goodness, nothing to compare to all of that. So thank you so much for everything that you shared. And I think that those are the details for those of us who aren't in the area and not as involved in the ground effort as you are. All of us are hearing about this, and you've just put it together so beautifully, how the meteorology and the lives all commingled into this horrible moment for this very, very, very unfortunate community. And let's sit with it, and let's think about what we can do if we all directed our energies towards something like this problem. What can we do to make it better? So
Yeah,
thank you.
Kim, let me say one thing. I've seen your work, and I don't know, maybe it's just because I see you on Facebook. I see your work more than others. I appreciate the way that you are willing to sit there and say, I don't know the answer. Because if we can't confront the problem, we can't solve it. And I really wish there were, like, we could clone you and have like 10 of you running around. I know there's other people listening to this who are in this field who do this work. I just want to thank you guys for that, because as somebody who's not trained in this stuff, like who doesn't understand all the jargon and a lot of other stuff that y'all use, like, it's comforting for me to hear somebody just be straight about where we are and just like you say, sit in it and own it. From my very narrow perspective, having been through a couple local events here that frankly are still upsetting me and causing me PTSD myself in some dumb way I don't quite understand. It seems to me that these events have one common theme, and it's that it's getting the vulnerable. And I heard a talk, a couple of years ago that turned my mind onto this. It was by Dan Halbertsel, who was the SUE in Nashville, who's now MIC up in St. Paul, I think. And he phrased everything to this EM community and media community that I was a part of that he was talking about. And he was saying that it influenced my messaging to the people that we communicate to. It's a function of making them not vulnerable. And if we can make them not vulnerable, we can help them. But man, that tornado last year that went into Putnam County, those people were in the quote unquote nice homes, and the tornado killed them. This was like an EF5 tornado flash flood. These people didn't make any wrong decisions. They were, and there's nothing wrong with them that they're living there. They're just trying to find a place to live. So I will say I've seen our replies in the Twitter sphere, which is usually the biggest conglomeration of ignorance on the planet. And I've seen where a lot of that ignorance is just driven from this almost disdain for victims, that they inherently did something wrong. And man, we got to change that attitude for those people who have it. These people are vulnerable, not because they're bad people or they made bad decisions or whatever. They're people. And man, if we can just love them, and I love the spirit of Jeff and Jeremy and Gabe on here about just having a heart for them. I mean, I heard you guys talk about supercells and holding these two things in tension, which, by the way, is a very church thing to say. That's a whole other podcast. But the holding in tension, like I hear of a supercell and I throw my middle finger up at the sky when I see it. Like I have just a visceral hatred for it. But I get what you're saying. Like I see where your heart is. And if instead of browbeating people on Twitter for not seeing it the way we do, we could just show them that, man, these are people that are, if you don't think they're loved by God, well, they're loved by somebody, or we love them, or else we wouldn't be doing this. And if we could just make people less vulnerable and not criticize the ones who just turned out to be vulnerable because they were poor, or because they just happened to live in a spot that was the bad spot to be in at a time. I don't know that we have answers to these questions. I think some of them are intractable, but Kim, I applaud you and everybody who's listening to this pod who's committed their careers to trying to figure out to make it a little bit better. Because if we make it a little bit better, we're doing the right thing. And if we're at least being honest about the things that we're bad at, then we're doing the right thing. Because as soon as I hear somebody who's trying to convince me of something and I suspect them of dishonesty, I've turned them off immediately. So if we lead from a position of vulnerability and intellectual honesty, then we can teach somebody some stuff. So that's my TED Talk. Bill, thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. And I'm going to stand behind that comment about Twitter.
Yeah, well, what is Troy? What's the big statement we always make about it's a toxic waste dump full of something terrible?
And I think David he addresses that, because this is part of a bigger problem of especially 2000 and 2021, when we seem to have just, our brains have exploded and kept us from the ability of critical thought. There's no critical damn thinking going on out there nowadays. We're so busy. Kim's trying, well, I'm just saying this as an example, but Kim's trying to attack Troy. And there's some people tell me the sun doesn't rise in the east and they won't argue with me, and I don't know how to argue with someone like that. And it's bigger. It's a bigger issue. And I think David brings up a very good point. And I will tell you, as we wrap up tonight, if you don't do anything, and I'm the first person that lightning would probably strike, but if you can have a thought and prayer for those people in Humphreys County and for people in Waverly, do that tonight. Because I've seen it. I saw it in the 70s there, and it just made a point again over the weekend, and just have a thought and a prayer for these people.
Well, thank you for that, Troy. I want to ask Gabe a quick question before we go. Gabe, any chance we're going to see a documentary at one of our great film festivals like the one we'll have in Birmingham this weekend at Sidewalk? Any plans for something like that from y'all's exploits?
There's always that idea floating around in the back of my head. Maybe in the future. I've definitely built up a good library of stock footage at this point.
Well, I wish James were here, because on September 6th, we're going to have filmmaker Josh Bullock, who is going to talk to us about his documentary film, God and the Tornado. He interviewed James for that film. And he's in London, so we're going to tape that show at 7:00. We're eventually trying to go that way anyway, but Josh is going to join us that night. I think that's going to be a very fascinating show as well. Let's talk picks of the week real quick. We're real late here. We kept Tom up way too late. I'm going to start with Jen Nairmore. Jen, what's your pick of the week for us?
First of all, my heart's full. I want to thank everybody here for your hearts. I've been very motivated and overwhelmed by everybody here. And David, thank you for sharing. You brought the heart of Waverly to the show and to this audience, and you put us there so we knew what actually happened and got to feel what the people went through. So thank you for sharing that. And all the guys from Tornado Trackers, I love your heart for helping people and telling their story. That's where my heart beats fast as well. And I appreciate that. So my pick of the week is Jeanetta Jones's obituary. And the reason I shared that is because there's a video embedded of her not that long ago involved with her ministry. So everybody could see her style and her talking about her love for God. And it was really neat. So that's what I wanted to share.
Outstanding, Jen. That's awesome. All right, I'll go next to Kim Cloco McLean. Kim, you got a great pick of the week for us?
Oh man, I'm going to actually get foghorned this week, but there's almost so much going on. I didn't even know where to turn first. But this whole podcast has been filled with wisdom and picks, and so foghorn for me.
Okay, well, we'll take that respectfully for sure. Troy, I know you got a pick of the week for.
No, I really don't. I
this is gonna be a non-pick
busy
week
with this place back here, and
how's the house repair coming?
It's I moved back in for the first time in 6 months. I slept here beginning last Sunday night, and so I'm back in the house, and still a lot of things to be done following the winter storm of February. But getting back in, and it's starting to happen, so I'm thankful.
Well, we're glad to see you there. Do you mind if we start an office pool on when you'll get it all cluttered back up to its original?
You might want to go for like 2035. Okay, go for 2035. Well, notice Kim laughing. She knows it's the truth.
Well, I do, but I'm also laughing because by the time you get back into your house, it's probably going to be the case that mine gets blown away. I mean, at this
this hadn't
rate,
been Kim's or James or my year, so you know.
No, this has not been a good year, but thank you for being here tonight, Troy, sharing everything. All right, guys, I think I've got a mass set of foghorns here, or do I have some picks of the week out of our group? I'm going to start with Gabe. Gabe, what you got for us?
I didn't know I was supposed to have a pick of the week, but I do have
see if
one.
The guest booking officer was worth a flip, you'd probably know.
Something I've utilized a lot in the past week, Levi Cowan's Tropical Tidbits. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with that. Just an awesome resource during the hurricane season. His daily videos breaking down the forecast are just wonderful. So if you don't know about it, great resource to keep up to date with this hurricane season, which is about to ramp up.
It truly is the go-to website, right? I use it as much as I use the National Hurricane Center's website for information, for recon, for satellite, for model data. It cannot be beat. I don't know how he's serving it to what has to be a huge audience that's using that tool, but that's a great one. Thank you for sharing that, Gabe, and thank you for being here tonight. All right, Jeff, what you got for us?
Yeah, I'm brain dead these days. I just started school for the first time in 20 something years. So
we didn't really get into that.
I'm in the world of regional geography and things like that. So I just
started reading about the savannah in Africa.
Oh, not even there yet. I'm 1 week into it and I'm already overwhelmed. So how about that? So I'm having to revisit my 20-year-old self, which is quite a few years ago. So rebooting what it means to be an academic.
Well, we're sure glad you're here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks,
we'll welcome you back anytime. Jeremy, what you got for us this week?
Yeah, I'll do a little self-promo for us Tornado Trackers guys. We've got a podcast, and specifically, I will pick season 1, episode 8, where Ginger Z came and gave us a little bit of her time. I know she's been a guest on y'all's pod before. and James knows her well. She's just obviously a total pro, right? And just gives an absolutely incredible interview. But she really hit on some just amazing topics, kind of that really touched our hearts as just humans, and like really like philosophical questions of like why we do certain things and why we're motivated. So if you have a dream, if you have a desire to do anything in life, listen to that interview. It's pretty stellar. We just lucked out. We hardly did anything. We got it out of the way. So check that out.
You can't go wrong with Ginger Z being on your podcast, that's for sure. And you can't go wrong with her and James Spann doing a stage show at your NWA Weather Ready Fest. We had, worked really hard, built this incredible script for them based on Allie Skywarn, and they did one show and they did it beautifully. And Ginger came up and said, "Do you mind if we ditch the script?" Ginger Z, we do not. You and James Spann can do whatever you want to do. You can just go wild with it. And what they did was so much better than what we'd given them to do. That's for sure. All right. I think I've covered everybody down to Mr. Moore, the legend, Tom Moore. Anything you want to promote, pick, talk about on the show tonight?
Yeah, it's a great night, first of all. I'd like to applaud Kim and David for bringing the flooding issue to the forefront. It's something that needs to be expanded, and a lot more work has to be done. So thank you for that. As far as Twitter goes, it is a wasteland, but there is a PhD student at Mississippi State, Craig Cece. Some of you probably follow him. He really follows storms very well, and he has an interesting story too. But he also connects the human interest and the social science for mental health, for example, as far as that goes. And so he's capital C _ Stormwatch to follow him. He also does some work with COVID and the weather. So anyway, beyond that, Jeanetta, you were great. I love you. Rest in peace. Bye.
Thank you, Tom. Please, we'll come back real soon, and we will not forget this wonderful lady. But thank you for that. Thank you for being here tonight to give her tribute. And David Drobny, I did not forget you on purpose. I was just climbing down my little Zoom ladder over here, and somehow I skipped right over you.
Yeah, Mr. Moore is one of the kids who grew up watching the Weather Channel. Thank you for your work. I'm sorry for your loss. She was fantastic.
And so were you.
Yeah, and so are you. Nobody's talking about you, but I'm of the generation. I'm Jeff's age, actually, exactly. And I grew up watching Weather Channel. And as a weather nerd who didn't know he was a weather nerd, I watched an unbelievable amount of it, of Weather Channel. It's the only Weather Channel we had. And I learned so much from that. And so of the things that got me to doing what I'm doing here were built upon the hours upon hours upon hours of watching you guys broadcast. Mm-hmm. You were the only resource for somebody like me who moved around, who wherever I moved, you were always on TV. So thank you for that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't get the opportunity. I mean, I can't believe I'm 45 and I'm talking to a guy who was on the Weather Channel. Yeah, she was fantastic, and y'all did such great work. And the people who could thank you will line up around the block 45 times, who you'll never meet. So let me say thank you for all the y'all's work that y'all did. And by the way, the moon story was fantastic. My pick of the week is the Community Foundation has activated its Tennessee Emergency Response Fund. There's a direct link there. If you have 2 nickels to scrape together to send down there to help them, this organization will make sure it's used in a nonprofit in an effective way. This is a respected fund that all the people who know what they're talking about around here are passing around. I'm not saying it's the only one, it's just the one that I'm promoting tonight. So that's mine.
That's outstanding. And we appreciate that. That gives us good confidence in using that, David. Thank you very much. My pick of the week tonight is Doug Hattie, who appeared on the show several weeks ago. His son Christian has gone into hospice. Thanks to Steve Holmes for letting me know about this, but they've stopped all treatments. And their family's journey Facebook page is my pick of the week, as we ask for good thoughts and prayers for Doug and Christian and that entire family. Wonderful, wonderful people. And I know tonight, this, in a very emotional time, this is, fits right in with that. we need to care and love about for them, because they're important, wonderful people. So I did try really hard, Jennifer Nairmore, to get the show done by 11 o'clock, but I didn't do a very good job in the Eastern time zone.
That's
just
okay.
couldn't stop.
Yes.
But
right now I am really glistening right now, so I'm ready. Whew, it is hot up here.
Yeah, so Columbus, Ohio, people are sweating too. So
it's a little
anyway.
hotsy totsy. Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited. The next several weeks going to have some great shows coming up on WeatherBrains. We're going to talk. Kim's got next week's show, don't you, Kim? What's brewing in Weather Radar, right?
Yep, I'm still working on it, but we'll talk about it.
Okay.
There's
right.
a couple groups that are more or less willing to chat in our forum. But it's such an interesting area. I will get people. We'll talk.
There are lots of people tonight that are in Tulsa for the NWA, or I guess about 150 people, and a lot of people watching online and doing it through the internet. The week after that, I mentioned Josh Bullock will join us. We're going to talk about the NWS in the cloud on the 13th. And I've got a really interesting show on WeatherBrains 822 on October 11th. There was a fantastic article in Wired about the biblical floods that have happened in the Central Valley of California over eternity. And we are way overdue for another of these, Waverly floods on a huge scale that could end up being a $750 billion disaster, because it's going to take out a lot of our agriculture. And I think it's very important we talk about it. So we're trying to arrange how we can talk about that. Because I was thinking tonight, there in Waverly, the only thing that would have been of any use is if you had some sort of tsunami warning system. Like on the West Coast, Cannon Beach, Oregon, you see these signs everywhere. If you feel the earthquake, or hear the sirens, go to higher ground. But, would that even work? It's, one day we're going to find out. Well, I think that's all. We've been a long show here tonight. We appreciate everybody that was on. It was fantastic participation. Mr. Moore, thank you. Jeff, Jeremy, Gabe, thank you. David, thank you for joining at the last minute. It was when I thought about you Saturday morning while all this was going on, and y'all were on top of it, of course. A very terrible event. But WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We do it Monday nights, 8 o'clock Central Time. You can find us on all the normal podcasting platforms that are out there. If you have a question or comment, email at weatherbrains.com. Even a guest suggestion, love those. Send them along with some contact information. We love them even more. But till next Monday night, when Kim Cloco McLean will be in charge of our show, we'll be talking radar. I'm guest booking officer Bill Murray, telling you to have a great week and keep an eye to the sky, because you'll always have something fun to look at. Well, thank y'all for an incredible show.
Yeah. Thank you, y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
That was
y'all.
amazing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes.
Appreciate
Stay
it,
in
guys.
close touch, everybody. We'll have you back soon, Tom. Anytime, Jeff, Jeremy, Gabe.
Thank you.
David,
Appreciate it.
you're always
Love it.
welcome.
Yeah, well, hopefully you don't have to call me, because usually something bad has happened.
Yeah, we're gonna rectify that. Call you when it's pretty.
Yeah, well, I'm not a sunny disposition conversationalist unless I'm I'm a lawyer every day. The last thing I want to do when I come home is talk to people and convince them something that they should do is something that they shouldn't do. Anyway, no, I appreciate you guys, and Mr. Moore, again, I just thank you, man. Like there is a legion of nerds who are my generation who watch you and followed all you guys. Yeah, we're all on here. And you pour so much time and effort and energy into that, and wondering if anybody was watching. Man, we were watching.
Right.
We were. Yep. I was watching in 1983 when it was just first out there. Kim Cloco McLean, you think we're going to find out there's 23andMe tests for this defective gene that we have as meteorologists?
Man,
I wonder if they're testing for that. We could probably do some interventions with the children that have it before they get to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll show you. You might be a meteorologist.
Yeah.
Just watch out for that.
Y'all have a great week.
Thanks, y'all. Good night.
Bye,
Thank y'all.
guys worked together at church and just kind of morphed into storm chasers. And your story is fascinating. Goodness, the whole thing was so good. It's still going on. So. Nope, they just stopped. They just stopped. They just stopped. Ooh, what a great show tonight. Wow, this is this magical simulcast here with WeatherBrains Live and Song of the Night on Instagram Live. But what a show tonight. Goodness, I can't wait to go back and listen to this because I had to miss a lot of it at the end here. But again, thanks to everybody for being on the show. Just outstanding. It's one of the best shows ever. It was really good. So, but thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys on the WeatherBrains side next Monday night.